Welcome, welcome, welcome to Fiction Blue. Today we bring you an unforgettable story. What if Harry walked into Gringotts at age 6 and discovered he was the reincarnation of Merlin? Loving our content? Smash that like button and join our family by subscribing. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let the story begin. Chapter 1, The Awakening. The July sun beat down mercilessly on Privet Drive, baking the perfectly manicured lawns and wilting the hydrangeas that stood in neat rows along identical garden paths. Inside number 4, a small boy with unruly black hair and startlingly green eyes pressed his face against the crack of the cupboard door, watching dust motes dance in the beam of light that sliced through the darkness of his cramped living space. Harry Potter was 6 years old, small for his age, and perpetually hungry. Not that Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia would acknowledge this fact. According to them, he was fed perfectly adequately for a burden, and should be grateful for the roof over his head and the hand-me-down clothes that hung from his thin frame like circus tents. "Boy! Get out here and weed the garden before Vernon gets home." Aunt Petunia's shrill voice cut through his thoughts. "And don't you dare complain about the heat." Harry sighed and pushed open the cupboard door. "Yes, Aunt Petunia." The garden was a furnace. Sweat immediately beaded on Harry's forehead as he knelt in the dirt, yanking stubborn dandelions from between Aunt Petunia's prized roses. His stomach growled loudly. Breakfast had been a single piece of toast and a glass of water, and lunch had been withheld as punishment for looking at Dudley funny during morning cartoons. As Harry worked, he felt a strange sensation in his fingertips, a tingling, like static electricity but somehow more alive. It had been happening more frequently lately, this odd feeling that something within him was trying to escape. Sometimes, when he was frightened or angry, strange things happened around him. Glass shattered. Lights flickered. Once, his teacher's hair had turned blue when she'd humiliated him in front of the class for a homework assignment Dudley had destroyed. "Freak!" Harry tensed at the familiar voice. Dudley Dursley waddled across the lawn, flanked by his friends Piers Polkiss and Malcolm something or other. At 11 in the morning, their faces were already smeared with chocolate and ice cream. "What are you doing, freak?" Dudley snickered, poking Harry hard in the ribs with his foot. "Gardening," Harry answered flatly, not looking up. Experience had taught him that eye contact with Dudley when his friends were around was an invitation for violence. "Look at him playing in the dirt like the worm he is," Piers laughed, and Malcolm joined in dutifully. Harry continued pulling weeds, trying to make himself invisible. It never worked. "I'm bored," Dudley announced. "Let's play Harry hunting." Harry's heart sank. Harry hunting was Dudley's favorite game, one that inevitably ended with Harry nursing bruises in his cupboard. He glanced at the house, but Aunt Petunia had disappeared inside, probably to gossip on the phone about the neighbors. "You get a 10-second head start," Dudley said, grinning maliciously. 1. Harry scrambled to his feet. 2, 10. Dudley shouted, and the 3 larger boys lunged forward. Harry ran. His thin legs carried him swiftly down Privet Drive, his oversized trainers slapping against the pavement. He could hear the thundering footsteps of his pursuers, their excited whoops echoing in the summer air. He darted between houses, through back gardens, and over low fences, but the footsteps behind him grew louder. A burning stitch formed in his side as he rounded the corner onto Magnolia Crescent. Harry glanced desperately for somewhere to hide, but the street was devoid of cover. He could hear Dudley's labored breathing now, surprisingly close. "Got nowhere to run, freak," his cousin wheezed. Panic surged through Harry's small body. The tingling in his fingertips intensified, spreading up his arms and through his chest. It felt like electricity was coursing through his veins, gathering somewhere behind his navel. He needed, to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. "Please," he whispered, closing his eyes tightly. "Take me away from here." The tingling exploded into a rush of energy. Harry felt a terrible squeezing sensation, as if he were being forced through a very tight rubber tube. His ears popped painfully, and his stomach lurched. For a terrible moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. Harry's feet hit solid ground. He stumbled forward, gasping for air, and opened his eyes. He was no longer on Magnolia Crescent. Instead, Harry found himself standing in a narrow, cobblestone street crowded with people wearing the strangest assortment of clothing he'd ever seen. A woman swept past in emerald robes, deep in conversation with a man wearing what looked like a top hat and a purple velvet suit. An elderly gentleman in a midnight blue cloak haggled with a street vendor over the price of something that appeared to be moving in a cage. Harry blinked rapidly, certain he must be dreaming. He pinched himself hard on the arm. Ow! He winced. Not dreaming, then. Cautiously, he began to walk, weaving between the oddly dressed shoppers. Signs hung from storefronts advertising things like self-stirring cauldrons and premium owl treats. A group of children pressed their noses against a window display of, were those actual flying broomsticks? Watch where you're going, lad. A gruff voice barked as Harry collided with a short, stout man carrying a stack of what appeared to be eyeballs in a jar. Sorry, Harry stammered, backing away. Please, sir, where am I? The man looked at Harry as if he'd sprouted a second head. Where are you? Diagon Alley, of course. Where are your parents, boy? Before Harry could respond, the man huffed impatiently and continued on his way, muttering about irresponsible guardians and children running wild. Diagon Alley. The name resonated strangely in Harry's mind, as if he'd heard it before in a half-remembered dream. He continued walking, his initial fear giving way to wonder. A shop window filled with creatures in cages, owls, cats, and things Harry couldn't name, caught his attention. Next door, a store displayed robes in every color imaginable, with a sign declaring, Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Harry's reflection in the window shocked him. His face was pale, his hair even messier than usual, and his baggy clothes stood out starkly against the colorful, well-fitted garments of the people around him. He looked exactly like what he was, a lost, undernourished child who didn't belong. A sudden commotion drew his attention. A group of red-robed individuals pushed through the crowd, their faces stern and purposeful. Ministry business, one of them called. Please clear a path. The crowd parted reluctantly, whispers following in the red-robed figure's wake. Magical disturbance. Unauthorized apparition. Tracking the source. Harry didn't know what apparition meant, but something told him it had to do with his sudden appearance in this strange place. Instinctively, he ducked behind a display of books outside a shop called Flourish and Blots, his heart racing. As the red-robed figures passed, Harry slipped away in the opposite direction, deeper into the twisting alley. The buildings grew taller and closer together, casting long shadows over the cobblestones. The crowd thinned, and Harry found himself in a quieter section of the street. Ahead, a massive white marble building towered over the neighboring shops, its burnished bronze doors gleaming in the sunlight. Stone steps led up to the entrance, where a strange creature in a scarlet and gold uniform stood guard. It was shorter than Harry but had long fingers, pointed ears, and a clever, stern face. Something about the building called to Harry. An inexplicable certainty filled him, whatever had happened to him, whatever this place was, answers awaited inside that marble structure. As Harry approached the steps, the creature, a goblin, his mind supplied, though he couldn't fathom how he knew this, fixed him with a penetrating stare. Young wizard, the goblin said, its voice surprisingly deep, what business brings you to Gringotts unaccompanied? Harry swallowed hard. I'm lost, he admitted. I don't know how I got here or where I am, exactly. The goblin's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You're in Diagon Alley, at Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Where are your guardians? At home, I suppose, Harry said. In Surrey. I was running from my cousin, and then suddenly I was, here. Something in the goblin's expression changed, a flicker of interest, perhaps. Your name, wizard child? Harry Potter, he replied automatically. The effect was immediate and bewildering. The goblin's eyes widened, and it made a strange gesture with its long fingers. Harry Potter, it repeated, as if tasting the name. Come with me. Without waiting for a response, the goblin turned and strode through the bronze doors. Harry hesitated only briefly before following. What choice did he have? He couldn't go back to Privet Drive, he didn't even know how he'd left it in the first place, and those red-robed people were searching for someone. Possibly him. Beyond the first doors was a second set, these made of silver, with words engraved upon them, Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed, for those who take, but do not earn, must pay most dearly in their turn. Harry didn't have time to read the rest before the goblin ushered him through into a vast marble hall. Hundreds of goblins sat on high stools behind a long counter, weighing coins on brass scales, examining jewels through eyeglasses, and scribbling in ledgers. Doorways lined the walls, with more goblins showing people in and out of them. The first goblin led Harry past the counter to a door at the far end of the hall. Several wizards looked up as they passed, their expressions curious or disapproving at the sight of a small, shabbily dressed boy being escorted through the bank. Grip Hook, the goblin called to another, informed Director Ragnarok that Harry Potter is here. Unaccompanied. The goblin called Grip Hook looked startled but quickly composed himself and disappeared through a side door. Am I in trouble? Harry asked timidly. The first goblin regarded him with an unreadable expression. That remains to be seen, Mr. Potter. Unexpected magic has consequences, especially for one so young and notable. Before Harry could ask what the goblin meant, Grip Hook returned. Director Ragnarok will see him immediately, he announced. In the Heritage Chamber. The first goblin looked surprised. The Heritage Chamber? Are you certain? Grip Hook nodded grimly. Director's orders. Harry found himself being led down a torchlit corridor lined with ornate doors. The goblins moved quickly, and Harry had to jog to keep up. They descended a flight of stone steps into a cooler, older section of the building. The marble gave way to rough-hewn stone, and the air smelled of earth and old magic. What's the Heritage Chamber? Harry asked, his voice echoing slightly in the stone passage. A place of truth, the first goblin replied cryptically. All will be revealed, Mr. Potter. They stopped before a circular door made of dark wood banded with iron. Symbols Harry didn't recognize were carved into its surface, and as he looked at them, they seemed to shift and change, as if alive. Grip Hook placed his palm against the door and spoke words in a harsh, guttural language. The symbols glowed briefly, and the door swung inward. The chamber beyond was circular and dimly lit by floating orbs of blue-white light. In the center stood a stone basin atop a pedestal carved to resemble intertwined serpents. The walls were lined with shelves holding ancient-looking scrolls, strange artifacts, and bottles filled with substances that glowed faintly in the gloom. Standing beside the basin was a goblin that radiated authority. Taller than the others, with silver streaks in his dark hair and a scar running from his left eye to the corner of his mouth, he wore robes of midnight blue adorned with silver runes. Harry Potter, the goblin said, his voice deep and resonant. I am Ragnarok, director of Gringotts. Your arrival is unexpected. Harry shifted nervously. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to come here. I don't know how I did it. Ragnarok's piercing gaze seemed to look through him rather than at him. Accidental apparition at your age is remarkable, Mr. Potter. But that is not what concerns me. He gestured to the basin. Do you know what this is? Harry shook his head. This is the Bloodstone Basin, one of our most ancient treasures. It reveals the truth of a wizard's heritage and magic. Ragnarok extended a long-fingered hand. Your presence here has triggered old wards and prophecies. We must know why. Harry hesitated, fear battling with curiosity. What do I need to do? 3 drops of blood in the basin, Ragnak replied. No more, no less. The first goblin produced a small, silver knife and offered it to Harry. Harry looked at it dubiously. The cut will heal instantly, Ragnak assured him. The bloodstone demands sacrifice, but it is not cruel. Taking a deep breath, Harry accepted the knife. Its handle felt warm against his palm, almost alive. With a quick motion, he pricked his index finger and held it over the basin. 3 drops of scarlet blood fell into the shallow depression in the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blood began to spread, forming intricate patterns across the surface of the basin. The patterns glowed with golden light, spiraling outward and upward into the air above the basin. Runes and symbols Harry couldn't understand but somehow recognized appeared and disappeared in rapid succession. The goblins gasped in unison. Ragnak took a step back, his eyes wide with what might have been fear, or reverence. Impossible, breathed Griphook. The golden light intensified, gathering into a brilliant sphere that hovered over the basin. Within it, images formed, a bearded man in flowing robes, raising a staff toward storm-filled skies, a white dragon in flight, a sword being thrust into stone, a castle rising from mist-shrouded waters. As Harry watched, transfixed, a voice that was not a voice spoke directly into his mind, twice born, twice destined magic's child and magic's master. The staff awaits the hand that shaped it, the sword yearns for its maker's touch. Emery's returns when magic falters, the once and future king shall follow. The golden sphere exploded into countless motes of light that swirled around Harry like fireflies. He felt them sinking into his skin, and with each tiny point of contact came a flash of memory that wasn't his own, standing on a windswept tor, channeling lightning through his body. Crafting a wand from the branch of an ancient oak. Teaching a golden-haired youth to harness his inborn magic. Sealing away dark forces in the depths of the earth. Creating a school where magic could be taught safely. Harry gasped, overwhelmed by the foreign memories flooding his consciousness. His knees buckled, and he would have fallen if Ragnak hadn't caught him with surprising gentleness. "Sit, young one," the goblin director said, guiding Harry to a stone bench against the wall. "Breathe deeply." Harry struggled to regulate his breathing as the torrent of memories gradually slowed to a manageable trickle. When he finally looked up, he found all 3 goblins kneeling before him, their heads bowed. "What's happening?" Harry asked, his voice trembling. "Why are you doing that?" Ragnak raised his head, his expression one of awe. "We kneel before Emery's Merlin, known to wizards as Merlin, the greatest mage to ever live. We kneel before his reborn spirit, which now resides within you, Harry Potter." "That's impossible," Harry protested. "I'm just Harry. Just, a boy no one wants." "The bloodstone cannot be fooled, cannot be tricked," Ragnak said firmly. "It has revealed your dual nature, Harry Potter by birth, Merlin Ambrosius by soul and magic." He rose to his feet. "The Goblin Nation has waited centuries for this moment. Ancient pacts must be honored." Harry's head throbbed as more fragments of memory surfaced, a treaty signed in blood, binding the Goblin Nation and Merlin in mutual protection and respect, knowledge entrusted to goblin keeping until the day of return, secrets buried deep beneath the earth, awaiting reclamation. "I made a promise," Harry said, the words coming from someplace beyond his conscious mind. "To return when I was needed most." Ragnak nodded solemnly. "Dark forces stir, young one. The wards that protect Britain's magical heart grow weak. The wizards have forgotten the old ways, abandoned the sacred sites." His voice lowered. "And the one who marked you as an infant, he is not truly vanquished." Harry's hand moved automatically to the lightning bolt scar on his forehead. "Voldemort," he whispered, though he had never heard the name before. Or had he? The boundaries between Harry's memories and those of Merlin were blurring. "Do not speak his name here," Griphook hissed anxiously. "Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself," Harry responded automatically, then blinked in confusion. The words had felt right, though he wasn't sure where they had come from. Ragnak smiled thinly. Already the wisdom returns. He turned to the other goblins. Leave us. What passes between Emrys and Ragnarok must remain private. The two goblins bowed deeply and withdrew, the circular door closing silently behind them. You are in danger, Harry Potter, Ragnarok said once they were alone. Your apparition here has alerted the Ministry of Magic. They will be searching for the source of such powerful, unregistered magic. And when the old wizard learns of it, old wizard? Harry interrupted. Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and the one who placed you with those muggle relatives. A flash of anger surged through Harry, startling in its intensity. He left me with the Dursleys. They hate magic. They hate me. A grave error in judgment, Ragnarok agreed. Though perhaps not entirely his own. Prophecies have entangled both your lives, yours as Harry Potter and yours as Merlin Reborn. The goblin studied him thoughtfully. The question now is what path you will choose, young one. You stand at a crossroads. Harry closed his eyes, trying to sort through the conflicting thoughts and memories swirling in his mind. Part of him, the 6-year-old boy raised in a cupboard, wanted to cry, to find someone who would take care of him and make sense of all this. But another part, ancient, powerful, and increasingly coherent, was already calculating, planning, remembering skills and knowledge accumulated over a legendary lifetime. I need time, Harry said finally, opening his eyes. Time to understand what's happening to me. Time to learn control. Ragnarok nodded approvingly. Wisdom indeed. The Ministry cannot track you within Gringotts, ancient treaties prevent it, but you cannot remain here indefinitely. What about? Harry hesitated, struggling to articulate the strange double awareness he was experiencing. What about my things? Merlin's things. I remember, objects of power. Knowledge stored for safekeeping. They await you in the deepest vaults, Ragnarok confirmed. But accessing them will require more than mere blood. The protections were designed by Merlin himself, by you, to recognize not just your physical form but your magical signature when fully awakened. And I'm not, fully awakened. Not yet. The memories return gradually, as does the power. Too much, too quickly would overwhelm your young body. Ragnarok reached into his robes and withdrew a small, leather pouch. This, however, may help speed the process safely. He handed the pouch to Harry, who cautiously loosened the drawstring. Inside was a smooth, round stone that seemed to shift colors as he looked at it, blue to green to purple to gold. A memory stone, Ragnarok explained. Created by Merlin, by you, and entrusted to goblin keeping. It contains knowledge accessible only to its creator. It will help integrate your past and present selves. Harry closed the pouch and slipped it into the pocket of his oversized jeans. Thank you. But I still need somewhere safe to go, to learn. Ragnarok considered this. There is one who might help, a wizard who owns a shop in a forgotten corner of Diagon Alley. He deals in rare books and ancient artifacts. Some say he is as old as Gringotts itself, though he appears no older than 50. He has connections to the old ways. What's his name? Harry asked. He is known now as Artemis Old. Whether that is his true name, even we do not know. But he honors the old pacts and has no love for the Ministry's restrictions on ancient magic. Ragnarok's expression grew serious. Before you leave, young one, you must disguise yourself. The lightning scar marks you too clearly as Harry Potter. The goblin moved to a shelf and selected a small, silver box. Opening it, he removed what looked like an ordinary silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of a coiled serpent. A glamour charm, Ragnarok explained, holding it out. It will conceal your most distinctive features and deflect casual attention. Not foolproof against determined magical scrutiny, but sufficient for your immediate needs. Harry took the necklace, feeling a strange resonance as his fingers closed around it. Something stirred in his memory, knowledge of how such charms worked, how they could be enhanced or broken. Simply wear it and think of how you wish to appear, Ragnarok instructed. Nothing too dramatic, subtle changes are less likely to draw attention. Harry slipped the chain over his head and closed his eyes. He focused on his appearance, imagining his unruly black hair turning a lighter brown, his vivid green eyes shifting to a more common hazel, his lightning scar fading to invisibility. He felt a cool sensation wash over him, like stepping through a waterfall. When he opened his eyes, Ragnarok was nodding in approval. Effective. You appear now as merely another wizard child, unremarkable to most observers. How do I find this Artemis old? Harry asked, touching his forehead and finding the scar's familiar ridge missing beneath his fingertips. His shop lies at the junction where Diagon meets Verdant Alley, a small side street most wizards overlook. The sign reads, Old Tomes and Curiosities. Tell him Ragnarok sends you with the blessing of Emrys. The goblin director moved to the circular door and placed his palm against it. I will provide an escort to guide you safely out of Gringotts through a less used exit. As the door swung open, Harry felt a wave of uncertainty. He was 6 years old, alone in a strange world, with memories and powers he didn't understand gradually awakening within him. What if this Artemis person wouldn't help him? What if the Ministry or this Dumbledore found him first? Ragnarok seemed to sense his doubt. Fear not, young Emrys. Your return has been foretold for centuries. Those who honor the old ways will rally to you when the time is right. He gestured to Griphook, who waited outside the door. The Goblin Nation stands with you, as we promised long ago. Harry nodded, squaring his small shoulders. Thank you, Director Ragnarok. I won't forget this. Indeed you won't, Ragnarok said with a hint of amusement. For you have remembered far more important things after far longer. Griphook led Harry through a labyrinth of narrow stone corridors that sloped gradually upward. They passed sealed vaults with strange symbols carved into their doors, chambers where the distant clink of gold could be heard, and what appeared to be a subterranean river crossed by a narrow stone bridge. The secondary exit leads to Verdant Alley, Griphook explained as they climbed a spiral staircase. Less used, less watched. The Ministry rarely bothers with it. Why is the Ministry looking for me? Harry asked. What did I do wrong? Griphook snorted. Exist, primarily. The Ministry of Magic regulates all magical activity, especially that performed by underage wizards. Apparition, the method by which you transported yourself here, is strictly controlled and typically impossible for children. Your feet will have set off numerous detection spells. They reached a small antechamber with a simple wooden door. Griphook produced a key and unlocked it, revealing a narrow alleyway beyond. Verdant Alley, the goblin announced. Turn right, proceed to the intersection, and you will find Old Tomes and Curiosities on the corner. Harry hesitated at the threshold. What if the Dursleys notice I'm gone? Griphook's expression turned cunning. Time moves differently in the Heritage Chamber, young Emrys. Though it felt like hours to you, barely 30 minutes have passed in the outer world. And should you choose to return to those relatives, Gringotts can ensure they remember you being present all along. Memory alteration, Harry thought, the knowledge surfacing from Merlin's consciousness. A complex but useful branch of magic. Thank you, Griphook, Harry said sincerely. The goblin bowed deeply. May your gold always flow and your enemies fall before you, Emrys reborn. With those words, Harry stepped into Verdant Alley. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and he found himself alone in a quiet, cobblestone street lined with shops that looked considerably older and more eclectic than those he'd glimpsed in Diagon Alley. Moving cautiously, Harry made his way toward the intersection Griphook had indicated. The shops here sold items far stranger than those he'd seen earlier, animated chess sets with pieces that argued amongst themselves, cages containing what appeared to be miniature dragons, bottles of swirling, color-changing liquids labeled with warnings in languages Harry couldn't read but somehow understood, poisons, antidotes, potions to induce prophetic dreams or temporary transformations. As he neared the corner where Diagon and verdant alleys met, Harry spotted a narrow storefront wedged between a shop selling astronomical instruments and one offering exotic familiars for the discerning wizard. The sign above the door, written in faded gold lettering, read Old Tomes and Curiosities. Below it, in smaller script, Knowledge Lost and Found. Harry approached the shop, his heart racing. Through the dusty window, he could see shelves overflowing with books of all sizes, display cases containing objects that glinted mysteriously in the dim interior light, and what appeared to be a stuffed raven perched atop a globe that slowly rotated of its own accord. Taking a deep breath, Harry pushed open the door. A small bell tinkled softly, announcing his arrival. The shop smelled of old parchment, dust, and something indefinable, something that reminded Harry of thunderstorms and ancient forests. "Just a moment," called a voice from somewhere in the depths of the shop. Harry waited nervously, taking in his surroundings. The interior was larger than it had appeared from outside, extending back into shadows where more shelves loomed. Books were stacked not just on shelves but on tables, chairs, and even in precarious towers on the floor, creating a maze of literary columns. Glass cases displayed artifacts that seemed to hum with contained power, a silver dagger with runes etched along its blade, a pocket watch with 13 hands, a crystal phial containing what looked like liquid starlight. "Well, well," said the voice, much closer now. "What have we here?" A man emerged from between two towering bookshelves. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked black hair tied back in a short ponytail. His face was angular, with high cheekbones and a straight nose, and his eyes were a startling shade of violet. He wore robes of deep blue over what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary muggle suit. "A young visitor," the man observed, studying Harry with undisguised curiosity. "How unusual. Are you lost, child?" Harry swallowed nervously. "Are you Artemis Old?" The man raised an eyebrow. "I am." "And you are?" "Ragnarok sent me," Harry said, remembering the goblin's instructions. "With the blessing of Emrys." Artemis Old went very still. For a long moment, he simply stared at Harry, his violet eyes seeming to pierce through the glamour charm. Then, moving with deliberate slowness, he walked to the shop door, turned the sign from "open" to "closed," and drew a wand from within his robes. Harry tensed, but the man merely waved the wand in a complex pattern. The windows darkened, and a shimmer like heat haze rippled across the walls. "Privacy wards," Artemis explained, tucking the wand away. "Now, perhaps you'd better tell me who you really are and what brings you to my doorstep with that particular introduction." Harry hesitated, then reached up and removed the glamour charm. The cool sensation washed over him again as his appearance returned to normal, unruly black hair, vivid green eyes, and the lightning bolt scar stark against his pale forehead. Artemis Old's eyes widened. "Harry Potter," he breathed. "The boy who lived." His gaze sharpened. "But that doesn't explain the blessing of Emrys. The goblins do not invoke that name lightly." "I'm not just Harry Potter," Harry said, the words feeling strange on his tongue. I'm the reincarnation of Merlin. At least, that's what the Bloodstone Basin showed." Artemis stared at him for a long moment, then threw back his head and laughed, a deep, rich sound that filled the dusty shop. "Of course you are," he said when his mirth subsided. "The fates do enjoy their little jests, don't they? The greatest Dark Lord of our age, defeated by a baby who turns out to be the reincarnation of the greatest wizard who ever lived." He shook his head in amazement. "No wonder Dumbledore has been so anxious about your safekeeping." "You know Dumbledore?" Harry asked warily. "Know him? I've been avoiding him for the better part of a century," Artemis replied with a grimace. "Brilliant wizard, to be sure, but far too convinced of his own righteousness." He gestured toward the back of the shop. "Come, young Emrys, or should I call you Harry? We have much to discuss, and this isn't the place for it. Too many ears in the walls of Diagon Alley, even with privacy wards." Harry followed Artemis through the maze of books to a door nearly hidden behind a tapestry depicting a forest scene where the trees actually swayed in a non-existent breeze. The door opened onto a cozy sitting room with a fireplace, overstuffed armchairs, and walls lined with yet more books, though these appeared older and more carefully preserved than those in the shop. "Sit," Artemis invited, gesturing to one of the armchairs. "Would you care for tea? Pumpkin juice? Something stronger, perhaps, for your older self?" He winked. "Just water, please," Harry said, climbing into the chair, which seemed to adjust itself to better fit his small frame. Artemis waved his hand, and a glass of water appeared on the small table beside Harry's chair. Another gesture produced a steaming cup of tea for himself. He settled into the chair opposite Harry's and regarded him thoughtfully. "So. The bloodstone revealed your dual nature," Artemis said. "That explains the magical surge that has the Ministry in an uproar. They've had Aurors, magical law enforcement," he added, seeing Harry's confusion, combing Diagon Alley for the past hour. "Quite the coincidence that you should find your way to Gringotts and undergo the heritage ritual today of all days." "Why today?" Harry asked, sipping his water gratefully. He hadn't realized how thirsty he was. June 21st. The summer solstice. One of the 4 days of the year when the veil between worlds grows thin and magic flows most freely. Artemis studied him over the rim of his teacup. "Not coincidence at all, I suspect. The old magic has its own ways of ensuring balance." Harry frowned, trying to make sense of everything. "So. I'm really him. Merlin. But I'm also me. How does that work?" "Reincarnation is a complex process," Artemis said. "You are Harry Potter, your experiences, your childhood, your loves and fears are all your own. But within you now awakens the soul of Merlin Emeries, called Merlin by most. His memories, his knowledge, his power, they return to you gradually, integrating with who you already are." He leaned forward. "Think of it not as two separate people sharing one body, but as one soul that has lived 2 distinct lives, now remembering both." That made a strange sort of sense to Harry. Already he could feel Merlin's memories settling alongside his own, not replacing them but complementing them, filling in vast gaps of knowledge. "Who are you, really?" Harry asked suddenly. "How do you know about all of this?" Artemis smiled enigmatically. "Let's just say I'm very, very old, though not quite as old as your previous self. I've worn many names, lived many lives, though not through reincarnation as you have. My methods are different." "You're immortal," Harry said, the knowledge coming from somewhere beyond his 6 years of life experience. "In a manner of speaking," Artemis acknowledged. "Though I prefer the term, chronologically advantaged." His expression grew serious. "But we have more pressing matters to discuss than my longevity. You need sanctuary, training, and protection, not necessarily in that order. The wizarding world believes Harry Potter is safely hidden away until his 11th birthday, when he's due to attend Hogwarts. We need to keep it that way while nurturing both aspects of your nature." "But what about the Dursleys?" Harry asked. "Won't they notice I'm gone?" Artemis waved a dismissive hand. "Easily managed. A simulacrum charm can create the appearance of your presence, a magical duplicate that will eat, sleep, and perform simple tasks. Not sophisticated enough to fool a wizard for long, but more than adequate for muggles who pay you little attention anyway." Hope flared in Harry's chest. "You mean I don't have to go back there? Ever?" "Not if you don't wish to," Artemis said gently. "Though maintaining the illusion of your residence there serves a purpose. Dumbledore placed blood wards around your aunt's home, powerful protective magic anchored in your mother's sacrifice and your aunt's grudging acceptance of you under her roof. As long as those wards stand, many who might wish Harry Potter harm will be unable to locate you." Harry considered this. "So the fake me keeps the wards working, while the real me, what? Lives here?" Artemis chuckled. "This shop is merely my public face. I have more suitable accommodations elsewhere, a place where you can learn to control your awakening powers safely, away from prying eyes. He set down his teacup. But before we make any decisions, you should consult the memory stone Ragnarok gave you. It will help clarify your path. Harry had almost forgotten about the stone. He pulled the leather pouch from his pocket and loosened the drawstring. The color-shifting stone seemed to pulse with inner light as he tipped it into his palm. "How do I use it?" he asked. "Hold it in your dominant hand, your right, I believe, and close your eyes," Artemis instructed. "Focus your thoughts on a simple question: who am I?" Harry did as instructed, closing his fingers around the smooth stone. It felt warm against his palm, almost alive, like a tiny heartbeat pulsing in rhythm with his own. He closed his eyes and concentrated on the question. Who am I? The stone's warmth intensified, spreading up his arm and throughout his body. Harry felt a curious sensation, as if he were standing in two places at once, his physical body in the cozy sitting room and another, insubstantial form elsewhere. He opened his eyes, not his physical eyes, but some inner sight, and found himself standing on a mountaintop beneath a star-filled sky. Before him stood a man in robes of midnight blue embroidered with silver stars and symbols. His beard and hair were long and white, his face lined with age and wisdom. His eyes, however, were startlingly familiar, the same vivid green that Harry saw whenever he looked in a mirror. "Hello, Harry," the man said, his voice resonating with power and kindness. "I've been waiting a very long time for this moment." "You're Merlin," Harry whispered. "You're me." Merlin smiled. "I am what you will become, as you are what I once was. We are one soul in two times." He gestured around them. "This place exists between memory and possibility, a construct created by the memory stone to allow us to communicate." "Why did you do it?" Harry asked. "Why be reborn now, as me?" "Not by choice, young one. The universe has its own balance, its own requirements." Merlin's expression grew somber. "I made a promise, long ago, to return when magic itself was threatened. The signs have been gathering for centuries, the old sacred sites neglected, the ancient rites forgotten, the connection between wizard and magic reduced to mere technique and memorization." He sighed heavily. "And then a prophecy spoke of a child born as the seventh month dies, marked by a dark lord as his equal." "Me," Harry said, touching his scar reflexively. "Indeed. When that prophecy was made, my long-dormant soul stirred. The threat to magic had taken specific form, a wizard so corrupted by dark rituals that he threatened the very fabric of magical existence." Merlin's green eyes flashed. "Your mother's sacrifice, her love, created the perfect vessel for my return. She invoked protections older than wands, older than spells as modern wizards understand them. She tapped into the primordial magic that I once wielded, and in doing so, called to my waiting soul." Harry tried to absorb this information. "So when Voldemort tried to kill me, the convergence was perfect," Merlin confirmed. "Your own innate magic, your mother's protective enchantment, and my awakening consciousness combined to reflect the killing curse back upon its caster." He smiled sadly. "Though the price was terrible, your parents lost, and you condemned to a childhood of neglect." "And now?" Harry asked. "What happens now?" "Now you begin to remember," Merlin said. "Not all at once, your young mind could not contain the full weight of my memories and knowledge immediately. But gradually, as you grow in body and power, more will return to you." He extended his hand, and a staff of white wood topped with a crystal appeared in his grasp. "My tools and treasures await you, hidden where none but you can find them. My allies, those who have kept faith across the centuries, will come to your aid." "The goblins," Harry said, remembering Ragnarok's reverence. "And Artemis?" Merlin's expression turned curious. "Artemis? Ah, you mean the Wanderer. He was not known to me by that name, but I sense his essence through your thoughts." He nodded approvingly. A powerful ally indeed, though always walking his own path. Trust him, but remember that his priorities may not always align perfectly with yours. The mountaintop scene began to flicker, like a television with poor reception. Merlin looked up at the stars, which were dimming. Our time grows short, young one. The memory stone can sustain this connection only briefly until your magic strengthens. He locked eyes with Harry. Remember this, you are both Harry Potter and Merlin Ambrosius. Neither identity negates the other. Your experiences as Harry, your sorrows and joys, your friendships and struggles, these are not lesser than my ancient memories. They are the foundation upon which you will build a new understanding of magic itself. Will I see you again? Harry asked anxiously as the mountaintop grew increasingly transparent. Whenever you use the memory stone, though each time I will seem less separate from you and more a part of your own consciousness. Merlin's form was fading now. One last warning, beware the fractured soul that marked you. He is not truly dead, merely disembodied. And he is not the only threat you will face. The one who calls herself, but the rest of his words were lost as the vision dissipated entirely. Harry opened his physical eyes with a gasp, finding himself back in Artemis's sitting room, the memory stone cooling in his palm. Welcome back, Artemis said quietly. You were communing with the stone for nearly an hour. It felt like minutes, Harry said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. Time flows differently in such states. Artemis studied him intently. You look changed. More centered. Harry realized that he did feel different, more grounded, more certain. The confusion and fear that had plagued him since his sudden arrival in Diagon Alley had receded, replaced by a calm determination. He wasn't just a lost, unwanted child anymore. He had a purpose, a destiny beyond even the prophecy that had marked him as Voldemort's enemy. I need to learn, Harry said decisively. Everything, magic, history, the old ways that have been forgotten. He looked Artemis directly in the eye. And I need to prepare. Voldemort isn't gone forever. He'll try to return. Artemis nodded, seeming unsurprised by Harry's new resolve. Then we begin immediately. The summer solstice is a powerful time for new beginnings. He rose from his chair. There's something I need to show you, something I've been safeguarding for a very long time. He moved to the fireplace and pressed his palm against a seemingly ordinary stone in the mantel. The entire fireplace swung inward, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Come, Artemis said, his violet eyes gleaming with excitement. Your legacy awaits. Harry slipped the memory stone back into its pouch and followed Artemis into the secret room. It was small and circular, with a domed ceiling painted to represent the night sky, not just any sky, Harry realized, but the exact configuration of stars visible on the summer solstice in the year 537 CE. He knew this somehow, the knowledge surfacing unbidden from Merlin's memories. In the center of the room stood a pedestal of white marble. Upon it rested a wooden box carved with intricate knotwork patterns that seemed to shift and move as Harry looked at them. I've kept this for over 4 centuries, Artemis said softly. Retrieving it from a hidden vault beneath Glastonbury Tor during the dissolution of the monasteries. The monks who guarded it for nearly a millennium before that received it from the hands of Taliesin himself. The bard, Harry murmured, the name triggering a cascade of memories, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and a voice that could charm birds from trees or call lightning from clear skies. More than a bard, Artemis corrected. Taliesin was the last person to see Merlin, to see you, before your departure. He gestured to the box. He safeguarded your final message and most prized possession until the time was right. Harry approached the pedestal slowly, drawn by an inexplicable certainty that whatever lay within the box belonged to him in the deepest possible sense. As he neared, the knotwork patterns glowed with soft, golden light, responding to his presence. Only you can open it, Artemis said, stepping back. It has awaited your touch for 15 centuries. Harry reached out hesitantly, his small fingers hovering above the box. As he touched the polished wood, the knotwork patterns flared brilliantly, then unraveled like living vines, revealing seams in what had appeared to be solid wood. The lid of the box split into quarters that folded outward like the petals of a flower. Inside, nestled on a bed of midnight blue velvet, lay a wand unlike any Harry had glimpsed in Diagon Alley. It was long and slender, carved from pale wood that gleamed like mother of pearl. Spiraling patterns ran its length, and at its base was set a small crystal that caught the light in rainbow prisms. Rowan wood, Harry whispered, knowledge flowing through him. Freely given by the oldest rowan tree in the Caledonian forest. Core of dragon heartstring, from Ithusa, the white dragon of Albion. Your wand, Artemis confirmed. Created by your own hand in your previous incarnation. Not subject to the trace that the ministry places on modern wands sold to underage wizards. Undetectable, unbreakable, and attuned to your magic alone. Harry carefully lifted the wand from its velvet nest. The moment his fingers closed around it, a shock of recognition ran through him. The wand warmed in his grasp, and a shower of silver sparks erupted from its tip, swirling around him in a miniature galaxy of light. Power surged through Harry's small body, not overwhelming or painful, but rather like coming home after a long absence. The wand was part of him, an extension of his will made manifest. With it in his hand, the fragments of Merlin's memories seemed to organize themselves more coherently in his mind, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. There's more, Artemis said, indicating the box. Beneath where the wand had lain was a folded parchment sealed with wax impressed with the image of a dragon in flight. Harry carefully broke the seal and unfolded the parchment. The writing upon it was in a language he had never seen before, and yet he could read it perfectly. To myself reborn, if you read these words, the time of greatest need has come. Magic falters in the world, and the balance tilts toward darkness. Trust your memories as they return, but do not be bound by them. The past may guide, but the future is yours to forge anew. Seek the 4 treasures hidden at the cardinal points of Albion. Each contains a portion of the power I sealed away for safekeeping. The white wand you now hold will guide you to them when you are ready. Beware the Morrigan's daughter, who sleeps but does not die. Her hatred transcends death itself, and she will sense your return. Remember that magic is not merely a tool but a living force. The modern wizards have forgotten this truth, reducing it to spells and formulas. Remind them. Teach them. Heal the rift between the old ways and the new before all is lost. Until all memories become one, Merton Emery's Harry looked up from the parchment, his mind racing. The Morrigan's daughter, he repeated. I tried to warn me about her through the memory stone, but the connection broke before he could finish. Artemis's expression darkened. A formidable enemy from Merlin's time. Legends speak of her as half mortal, half divine, with power rivaling Merlin's own. She was defeated and bound, but not destroyed. And now she might awaken because I have, Harry concluded grimly. Along with Voldemort trying to return. And the Ministry hunting for the source of my accidental magic. And Dumbledore watching for signs of me leaving the Dursleys. He shook his head. Not exactly an easy start. Artemis laughed. When has a hero's journey ever begun easily, young Emery's? His violet eyes twinkled. But you have advantages your enemies cannot imagine, not least of which is that no one would expect to find Merlin reborn in a 6-year-old boy being raised by magic-hating muggles. Harry considered this. So I stay hidden. Learn in secret. Prepare. He looked down at the wand in his hand, feeling its reassuring warmth. But I'll need a teacher. As it happens, Artemis said with a slight bow, teaching young reincarnated wizards is one of my specialties. My shop provides the perfect cover. Who would question an antiquarian bookseller occasionally entertaining his young nephew? Your nephew? Harry asked, catching on. My sister's boy from America, come to stay with his eccentric uncle for the summer, Artemis confirmed with a wink. The glamour charm will give you a different appearance for these visits, and I know ways to move you between here and Privet Drive that neither the Ministry nor Dumbledore can track. Harry smiled, a real smile, perhaps the first he could remember. When do we start? We already have, Artemis replied, gesturing to the wand and parchment. But the formal lessons begin tomorrow. For now, we must return you to Privet Drive before your absence is noticed, and establish the simulacrum that will maintain your presence there while you're away. Harry reluctantly placed the wand back in its box, which resealed itself with the same flowing movement with which it had opened. Can I take it with me? Not yet, Artemis said gently. First, we must secure your relative's home against magical detection. Modern magic users might not recognize Merlin's wand for what it is, but they would certainly detect unauthorized magic being performed in a Muggle dwelling. He picked up the box. This will remain in my safekeeping until tomorrow, when you return for your first lesson. How will I get back here? Harry asked, following Artemis out of the hidden chamber, which resealed itself behind them. With this. Artemis moved to a bookshelf and selected a volume bound in faded green leather. Opening it, he extracted what appeared to be an ordinary bookmark made of silver-embossed cardboard. A port key, a magical object that will transport you instantly from one location to another when activated. This one is keyed to respond only to your touch and the password, Sanctuary. He handed the bookmark to Harry, who examined it curiously. It appeared perfectly ordinary, with a pattern of intertwined oak leaves along its border. Keep it hidden from your relatives, Artemis instructed. When you wish to come here, hold it in your hand, ensure you're unobserved, and speak the password. To return to exactly the same spot at Privet Drive, hold it and say, homeward. Harry slipped the bookmark into his pocket alongside the memory stone. What about the simulacrum? How does that work? We'll create it at your home, Artemis said. For that, I'll need to accompany you, disillusioned, invisible to Muggle eyes. He checked a peculiar watch with planetary symbols instead of numbers. It's nearly 3 o'clock. Your relatives will still be occupied with their daily routines. Shall we? Harry nodded, suddenly eager to put his plan into motion, to begin his journey toward understanding his dual nature and the destiny that awaited him. Yes. Let's go. Artemis retrieved his wand and tapped himself on the head, murmuring words in a language Harry almost recognized. The bookseller's form blurred and seemed to melt into the background, not truly invisible but difficult to focus on directly. Take my hand, Artemis's disembodied voice instructed. I'll apparate us to a secluded spot near your relative's home. Harry reached out, feeling invisible fingers close around his. The glamour charm still hung around his neck, maintaining his disguise as an ordinary brown-haired boy. Brace yourself, Artemis warned. Apparition can be disorienting the first few times. Before Harry could respond, the world compressed around him. The squeezing sensation returned, but less painful than before, as if Artemis's presence somehow buffered the effect. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but pressure and darkness, then they were standing in a small copse of trees at the edge of a park. Harry recognized it immediately, the park 3 blocks from Privet Drive, where Dudley and his friends sometimes came to torment smaller children. Currently empty, the park was silent except for the distant sound of a lawnmower and the call of birds in the trees above. Well done, Artemis said, still invisible. Many first-time apparition passengers become ill. Your previous self must have been quite accustomed to the sensation. Harry could feel memories stirring, of traveling vast distances through will alone, before apparition had been formalized into the rigid technique modern wizards used. The older magic had been more fluid, more intuitive, drawing directly from the Earth's ley lines rather than forcing reality to bend through sheer magical strength. This way, Harry said, leading his invisible companion toward Privet Drive. As they walked, he outlined his daily routine with the Dursleys, the chores, the meager meals, the cupboard under the stairs that served as his bedroom. Appalling, Artemis muttered when Harry described how Dudley received 37 birthday presents while Harry had never received so much as a card. Dumbledore has much to answer for, leaving you with such people. Blood wards or no blood wards, there were other options. They reached number 4, its pristine exterior giving no hint of the neglect Harry suffered within. Through the front window, Harry could see Aunt Petunia on the telephone, gesticulating animatedly as she peered through the curtains at Mrs. Number 7's new car. Uncle Vernon wouldn't be home from work for hours, and Dudley was likely still out with his friends, perhaps wondering where his favorite victim had disappeared to. "The back garden," Harry whispered. "There's a loose fence panel on the far side. We can slip in without being seen." They circled around to the back of the house. Harry led Artemis to a section of fence partially hidden by an overgrown rhododendron. One of the panels shifted easily, creating a gap just wide enough for a small boy to squeeze through. Harry went first, then held the panel open slightly longer than necessary to allow his invisible companion to follow. The back door was locked, but Harry knew where Aunt Petunia kept the spare key, under a flower pot shaped like a toadstool. He retrieved it and quietly unlocked the door, leading Artemis into the kitchen. They could hear Petunia's voice from the hallway. "And then she had the nerve to ask where I bought my gardening gloves, as if I'd reveal my sources to her after she stole my hydrangea idea." Harry motioned for silence and led the way to his cupboard. The small space was exactly as he'd left it, the thin, lumpy mattress, the single shelf holding his few possessions, the spiders that were his only companions in the darkness. "This is worse than I imagined," Artemis's voice whispered, tight with anger. "A prison cell would be more humane." Harry shrugged, long accustomed to his living conditions. "It's all I've known." "Not anymore," Artemis said firmly. "Now, step inside. I need to cast the simulacrum charm, and it works best when the subject is in their usual environment." Harry entered the cupboard and sat on the edge of the mattress. He felt Artemis's invisible presence crowd in behind him, and heard the soft whisper of a wand being drawn. "Hold still," Artemis instructed. "This is complex magic." Harry felt a curious sensation wash over him, as if a thin layer of his skin were being gently peeled away. There was no pain, only a mild tingling followed by a sense of lightness, as though something that had been weighing him down had been lifted. A soft golden glow filled the cupboard, momentarily blinding Harry. When his vision cleared, he found himself staring at himself. An exact duplicate of Harry Potter sat on the opposite edge of the mattress, blinking owlishly. "Hello," the duplicate said in Harry's voice. Harry looked questioningly toward where he sensed Artemis standing. "The simulacrum has limited intelligence," Artemis explained softly. "It can follow simple instructions, maintain basic conversations, and perform routine tasks. It will eat, sleep, and respond to your relatives as you would. It cannot leave the immediate vicinity of the house, and it will dissipate if subjected to strong magic." There was a pause. "It also cannot feel pain, though it will simulate appropriate responses if mistreated." That last part was a relief to Harry. At least his double wouldn't suffer as he had. "How do I control it?" Harry asked uncertainly. "Simply tell it what you want it to do," Artemis said. "Be specific but not overly complex. Think of it as giving instructions to a very literal-minded person." Harry turned to his duplicate. "When Aunt Petunia calls, go to her. Do whatever chores she assigns. Act exactly as I would. Eat meals when offered. Sleep in this cupboard. Don't tell anyone about me or about magic." The duplicate nodded solemnly. "I understand. If anyone asks where you were earlier today, say you were weeding the garden, then chased by Dudley, then hid until they were gone," Harry added, remembering the events that had led to his accidental apparition. "Weeding garden. Chased by Dudley. Hid. Got it," the simulacrum confirmed. Harry looked toward where he thought Artemis was standing. "Is that enough?" "For now," Artemis replied. "We can refine the instructions as needed. The simulacrum will last indefinitely as long as it remains within the boundaries of the property and isn't subjected to direct magical scrutiny." From the hallway came Petunia's voice, "Closer now, boy. Where are you? These windows won't clean themselves." "Go," Harry whispered to his double. Act normal. The simulacrum nodded and slipped out of the cupboard. Coming, Aunt Petunia, it called in a perfect imitation of Harry's reluctant tone. Harry heard his aunt's annoyed instructions about streak-free glass and proper use of newspaper instead of paper towels. The simulacrum responded appropriately, and soon the sound of movement in the living room indicated it had begun cleaning windows. Remarkable, Harry breathed. She can't tell the difference. Few could, without magical means of detection, Artemis said. Now, quickly gather anything you wish to take with you. We shouldn't linger. Harry looked around the cupboard. There was little he wanted from this place: a few broken toy soldiers he'd rescued from Dudley's trash, a cracked plastic dinosaur, a small metal car missing 2 wheels. None of it held any real value to him. What mattered were the new possibilities opening before him, the chance to learn about his true nature, to explore the magic awakening within him, to prepare for whatever destiny awaited the boy who was both Harry Potter and Merlin reborn. There's nothing here I need, Harry said firmly. Let's go. He felt Artemis's invisible hand clasp his shoulder gently. Then hold the port key and speak the password. Your new life begins now. Harry withdrew the bookmark from his pocket, clasped it tightly in his small fist, and whispered, Sanctuary. The world blurred around him as a hook-like sensation caught him behind the navel, pulling him away from Privet Drive and toward a future filled with magic, ancient memories, and the promise of belonging. Chapter 2, Hidden in plain sight. The bookmarked port key delivered Harry to a room he hadn't seen before, a spacious chamber with high ceilings and walls lined with books, scrolls, and curious artifacts. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows draped with shimmering blue curtains that seemed to move gently despite the absence of any breeze. Welcome to the atrium, Artemis said, materializing beside him. My actual residence, as opposed to the shop's back room where we met yesterday. Harry gaped at his surroundings. The floor was polished stone inlaid with a pattern of stars and arcane symbols that pulsed faintly with inner light. A massive oak table dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with open books, star charts, and what appeared to be a partially disassembled astrolabe. This is where I live? Harry asked, barely able to believe his luck. Artemis chuckled. This is where you'll study. Your living quarters are through there. He pointed to an arched doorway across the atrium. I've prepared rooms for you that I think you'll find more comfortable than previous arrangements. Harry crossed to the doorway and peered through. Beyond lay a cozy sitting room with comfortable-looking furniture, a crackling fireplace, and more bookshelves. Through another doorway, he glimpsed a bedroom with a 4-poster bed that looked big enough to fit the entire Dursley family. All this, for me? Harry whispered, overcome. Consider it 6 years of missed birthdays, Artemis said, his expression softening. Though I should mention that this entire residence exists in what you might call a fold-in space, a pocket dimension anchored to the physical shop but separate from it. We are, technically speaking, nowhere at all. Harry nodded absently, still taking in the wonders around him. After a lifetime of cupboard darkness and hand-me-downs, the luxury of space and beauty was overwhelming. Sir. May I ask a question? Harry turned back to Artemis. You may ask as many as you like, and please, call me Artemis. Sir, makes me feel even older than I am, which is saying something. Artemis smiled and conjured 2 chairs with a casual wave of his hand. Harry sat, his feet dangling above the floor. Why are you helping me? I mean, I'm grateful, but we only just met, and you've done all this. Artemis settled into the other chair, his violet eyes studying Harry thoughtfully. A fair question. I have several reasons. First, I owe Merlin, your previous self, a considerable debt. Second, I've spent centuries watching the wizarding world stagnate, forgetting the old ways in favor of rigid structures and bureaucracy. Your return presents an opportunity to restore balance. He leaned forward slightly. And third, I find myself genuinely concerned for your well-being, Harry Potter. No child should suffer as you have, especially not one with such a remarkable destiny. Harry absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man's kindness with his own experiences. Uncle Vernon had always taught him that no one gave anything without expecting something in return. "What do you want from me?" he asked cautiously. "Clever boy," Artemis said approvingly. "Always wise to understand motivations." "What do I want?" He considered for a moment. "I want to see what you will become when given the chance to grow into your full potential. I want to witness the return of true magic to a world that has forgotten its deepest nature. And selfishly, I want relief from centuries of boredom." His eyes twinkled. Teaching the reincarnation of Merlin promises to be anything but dull. Harry couldn't help but smile. "When do we start?" "Immediately," Artemis declared, standing. "But first, breakfast. Growing wizards require proper nourishment." With a snap of his fingers, the oak table cleared itself of books and charts. A moment later, platters appeared bearing eggs, sausages, toast, fresh fruit, and a pot of steaming tea. Harry stared at the feast, more food than the Dursleys would have allowed him in a week. "How did you do that?" he asked, amazed. "I didn't see you use a wand." "Ah, observant too," Artemis commented, gesturing for Harry to help himself. "Wands are focusing tools, useful but not strictly necessary for those with sufficient training and connection to magical energies. Modern wizards rely on them almost exclusively, but older forms of magic often bypassed such implements entirely." Harry filled his plate, trying not to seem too eager though his stomach growled loudly. "Will you teach me to do magic without a wand?" "Eventually," Artemis promised. "But first you must master the fundamentals. Your memories of Merlin's knowledge will return gradually, but your body, your magical pathways, must be developed properly to channel such power safely." As Harry ate, carefully at first, then with increasing enthusiasm as no one scolded him or took his food away, Artemis outlined a training schedule that made Harry's head spin. Magical theory, practical spellcasting, meditation, physical exercise, history, languages, herbology, potions, astronomy. "It sounds like more than Hogwarts teaches," Harry observed between bites of perfectly crispy toast. Artemis snorted. "Hogwarts offers a standardized curriculum designed to produce functionally competent wizards who fit neatly into ministry-approved roles. What I offer is a comprehensive magical education in the classical tradition." His expression grew more serious. "You must be prepared, Harry. Not just for the challenges of being the boy who lived, but for the greater responsibilities that come with being Merlin reborn." Harry nodded, feeling the weight of expectation settle on his small shoulders. "I want to learn everything. I want to be ready." "That's the spirit," Artemis approved. "Now, finish your breakfast. We begin with meditation, the foundation of all greater magical work." 3 weeks into his new life, Harry stood in the center of the atrium, eyes closed in concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he held his arms outstretched, palms up. "Feel the energy," Artemis instructed from somewhere to his left. "Not just within yourself, but in the air around you, in the stone beneath your feet. Magic isn't merely an internal force, it's a constant exchange between wizard and world." Harry breathed deeply, focusing on the sensation Artemis had been teaching him to recognize, a subtle vibration that permeated everything if you knew how to sense it. Gradually, he became aware of currents flowing around him, invisible tides of power that ebbed and flowed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I can feel it," he whispered, afraid that speaking too loudly might break his tenuous connection. "Good. Now, draw it toward you, gently. Imagine yourself as a vessel being filled." Harry visualized the energy streaming toward him, gathering in his outstretched hands. A tingling sensation spread from his fingertips up his arms, pleasantly warm. "Open your eyes," Artemis said softly. Harry did, and gasped. Tiny motes of golden light hovered above his palms, swirling like miniature galaxies. "Wild magic," Artemis explained, his violet eyes reflecting the golden glow. "Raw and unformed, responding to your will without specific incantation or wand movement. This is how magic was worked in the earliest days, before the development of structured spellcasting. The motes danced and spun, growing brighter as Harry's excitement increased. What can I do with it? Intent is everything with wild magic. Focus on what you wish to accomplish, not how. Harry concentrated on the swirling lights, picturing them rising and taking shape. Slowly, the golden motes drifted upward, coalescing into the form of a small bird that fluttered around the atrium before dissolving back into individual points of light that winked out one by one. Impressive for a first attempt, Artemis said, sounding genuinely pleased. Most children your physical age would struggle to produce even a single mote, let alone shape it. Harry let his arms fall to his sides, suddenly tired. I remembered something while I was doing it, a memory that isn't mine. I mean, it is mine, but from before. He struggled to articulate the strange dual awareness he'd experienced. I was standing on a cliff by the sea, calling birds from the sky. Not creating them from magic, but summoning real ones. Artemis nodded. The communion with nature was a cornerstone of old magic. Modern wizards manipulate and control, ancient practitioners conversed and collaborated. He gestured to a jug of water on the table. Drink. Channeling magic depletes your physical energy until your pathways develop fully. Harry gratefully accepted a goblet of cool water. Is that why I'm so tired after our lessons? Precisely. Your 6-year-old body is adapting to channel energies it wasn't meant to access for years yet. Artemis checked a peculiar timepiece that seemed to have several faces, each displaying different information. We've done enough meditation for today. Time for your history lesson, specifically, the founders of Hogwarts and their connection to earlier magical traditions. As July melted into August, Harry settled into a rhythm unlike anything he'd known at Privet Drive. Each morning began with physical exercise, running, stretching, and basic martial movements that Artemis insisted were necessary for magical discipline. After breakfast came meditation and magical theory, followed by practical lessons where Harry learned to channel his growing abilities through both wandless techniques and the traditional wand-based spellcasting he would eventually need at Hogwarts. Afternoons were devoted to academic subjects, magical history untainted by ministry censorship, ancient languages including Latin and Celtic dialects, herbology, astronomy, and the fundamentals of potion-making. Evenings were Harry's to spend reading from Artemis's vast library or exploring the strange pocket dimension that was now his home. Every third day, Harry used the port key to return briefly to Privet Drive, checking on his simulacrum and maintaining the illusion of his continued presence there. The magical duplicate performed admirably, enduring the Dursleys' neglect without complaint while Harry's real life expanded beyond anything he could have imagined a month earlier. Most importantly, Harry's access to Merlin's memories continued to develop. The memory stone proved invaluable, allowing him to commune with his previous self in the dreamlike mountain realm. Each session brought new knowledge, new understanding of the immense legacy he had inherited. The process is accelerating, Artemis observed one evening as Harry emerged from a 2-hour communion with the stone. Your magical signature is shifting, becoming more harmonized between your two aspects. Harry nodded, carefully returning the stone to its leather pouch. The memories feel less foreign now, more like they were always part of me but just out of reach. He looked up at his mentor. Merlin says it's time for me to begin working with his wand. Artemis raised an eyebrow. Did he, now? Well, far be it from me to argue with the greatest wizard of all time, even if he is currently occupying the body of a 6-year-old. He crossed to a cabinet inlaid with silver runes and waved his hand before it. The cabinet shimmered and opened, revealing the white wooden box that contained Merlin's wand. Remember, Artemis cautioned as he placed the box on the table, modern wizards use wands as crutches, channeling devices that make magic easier but less connected to its source. Merlin's wand was different, a collaboration between wizard and tool, each enhancing the other's power rather than the tool merely directing the wizard's intent. Harry opened the box, feeling the now familiar surge of recognition as he gazed upon the pale rowan wand with its crystal setting. When he lifted it, the wand hummed with energy, sending pleasant vibrations up his arm. What shall we begin with? He asked eagerly. Artemis considered. Something practical, I think. The shield charm, Protego. Defensive magic serves as an excellent foundation. He demonstrated the spell, creating a shimmering barrier of energy before him. The standard incantation and wand movement are effective enough, but with Merlin's wand, you might find a more intuitive approach works better. Focus on the feeling of protection, of safety, as you cast. Harry raised the wand, surprised at how natural it felt in his hand, as if he'd held it countless times before, which, in a sense, he had. He spoke the incantation, Protego, while moving the wand in the prescribed arc, but simultaneously he focused on the concept of shielding, of a barrier between himself and harm. The resulting shield blazed into existence with such intensity that Artemis took a step back in surprise. Unlike the transparent shimmer the older wizard had produced, Harry's shield was a solid-looking dome of swirling blue-white energy that covered him completely. Well, Artemis said, blinking at the display, that's certainly effective. Perhaps a bit too much power behind it, though. In a crowded environment, such a dramatic shield might cause more problems than it solves. Harry lowered the wand, and the shield dissipated. Sorry. It just happened. No apology needed, Artemis assured him. Control will come with practice. The important thing is that the wand responds to you perfectly. Try again, but this time, imagine a thinner, more focused shield. By the end of the session, Harry had mastered not only a standard Protego but several variations, including one that could be expanded to protect others nearby. The Rowan wand seemed to anticipate his intentions, requiring minimal effort on his part to produce effects that Artemis claimed were beyond many adult wizards. Remarkable progress, Artemis commented as Harry carefully returned the wand to its box. Though we'll need to work on modulating your power output. Magic isn't always about maximum force, finesse and precision are equally important. Harry nodded, feeling pleasantly tired but not drained as he often did after magical practice. The wand, it helps. It feels like it's doing half the work. That's the true purpose of a properly matched wand, Artemis explained. Not merely to focus magic, but to harmonize with the wizard's own energy, creating something greater than either could achieve alone. He patted the white wooden box. Few modern wand makers understand this principle. They craft serviceable tools, but rarely true partners. As Harry prepared for bed that night, his mind buzzed with new knowledge and the lingering sensation of the wand's power flowing through him. He'd been at Artemis's sanctuary for nearly a month now, and the contrast with his previous life couldn't have been more stark. At Privet Drive, he'd been unwanted, unloved, treated as a burden. Here, he was valued, nurtured, educated, prepared for a destiny that grew clearer with each passing day. Yet questions remained. The warning in Merlin's letter about the Morrigan's daughter troubled him, as did the mention of the four treasures he would need to reclaim. And beneath it all lay the knowledge that Voldemort, the dark wizard who had murdered his parents and tried to kill him, was not truly gone. One step at a time, Harry murmured to himself as he climbed into the enormous four-poster bed. Learn. Grow stronger. Be ready. He closed his eyes, sinking into sleep almost immediately. But his rest was not peaceful. In his dreams, Harry stood in a vast chamber hewn from living rock. Torches cast eerie green light over stone pillars carved to resemble writhing serpents. At the chamber's far end loomed an enormous statue of a severe-looking wizard with a long beard and cruel eyes. A voice echoed through the chamber, high, cold, and somehow familiar, "The boy lives, but he cannot hide forever. His power calls to me, even in this diminished state." Harry tried to move, to flee, but found himself rooted to the spot as a massive serpent slithered from the statue's open mouth. The snake's eyes glowed yellow in the torchlight as it approached, its scales scraping against stone. "Find him," the cold voice commanded. "Sense his magic. He is more than he appears, this child who defied me." The snake raised its head, tongue flicking out to taste the air. Its gaze fixed directly on Harry, as if it could see him despite the dream's insubstantial nature. Yes, the serpent hissed, its voice intelligible to Harry though he'd never understood a snake before. I taste his power on the winds. Ancient. Familiar. The old one returns. The cold voice grew more urgent. Where? Where is he? But before the serpent could answer, the dream shifted. Harry now stood on a windswept island, waves crashing against dark cliffs below. Before him was a circle of standing stones, and in the circle's center, a cairn of smaller rocks covering what appeared to be a burial mound. The cairn trembled. Rocks shifted and fell away as something pushed up from beneath. A pale hand emerged from the dark earth, slender, feminine, but somehow terrifying. As Harry watched in horror, the hand clawed at the air, fingernails elongating into talon-like points. A woman's voice, musical yet chilling, spoke from within the disturbed earth, I feel you, Emrys. After all these centuries, your magic calls to me. I stir from endless dreaming at your return. The pale hand clenched into a fist. This time, the victory shall be mine. Harry woke with a gasp, his nightclothes soaked with sweat. Dawn light filtered through his bedroom windows, casting long shadows across the floor. He sat up, heart racing, the dream images still vivid in his mind. Not just a dream, he whispered, certainty settling over him like a weight. Both visions had been real, or as real as such things could be. Connections across distance, glimpses of enemies awakening to his presence in the world. He needed to tell Artemis immediately. Throwing back the covers, Harry hurried to dress. As he pulled on his robes, proper wizard's clothing that Artemis had procured for him, correctly sized and of good quality, his gaze fell upon his reflection in the full-length mirror beside his wardrobe. For a moment, he thought he saw something different, not just Harry Potter looking back at him, but a taller, older figure superimposed over his childish form, with white beard and robes spangled with stars. The image lasted only a second before resolving back into his normal reflection, but it left Harry with a strange sense of reassurance. We face them together, he told his reflection. Harry and Merlin. One person now. Squaring his shoulders, he headed for the atrium to find Artemis. The next several days brought changes to Harry's training regimen. Following his prophetic dream, Artemis intensified both the theoretical and practical aspects of Harry's magical education. If both Voldemort's consciousness and this ancient enemy sense your awakening, we must accelerate your preparation, the older wizard explained as he added advanced protective magic and mental shielding techniques to their daily lessons. Harry took to the new material with remarkable aptitude, his access to Merlin's memories providing insights that bridged gaps in his understanding. By mid-August, he could maintain a basic occlumency shield, a mental barrier against intrusion, for several minutes at a time, and had mastered a variety of detection and warding spells far beyond what most wizard children his age would even know existed. Your progress continues to impress, Artemis commented one morning as they reviewed Harry's successful casting of a perimeter alert charm. Though I worry about the toll on your physical form. You're channeling energies that adult wizards would find taxing. Harry had noticed this himself. Though he'd gained weight and strength since leaving the Dursleys' neglectful care, he still tired easily after intense magical practice. The dichotomy between his 6-year-old body and the ancient power awakening within him created a constant tension. Is there anything we can do about it? Harry asked. Some way to strengthen my body to better handle the magic? Artemis considered this. There are potions that might help, fortifying elixirs used by magical researchers who work with volatile energies. And certain meditative techniques can improve your physical resilience. He tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the oak table. But there's another approach we might consider, one that was common in Merlin's time but has fallen out of practice. What's that? A magical familiar, a creature bonded to you spiritually and magically, sharing your burden and amplifying your strength. Artemis rose and moved to a bookshelf, selecting a thick tome bound in what appeared to be scaled leather. In the modern era, wizards keep pets, owls, cats, toads, that serve practical purposes but rarely form true magical bonds. In ancient times, however, the familiar bond was considered essential for any serious practitioner. He opened the book to a page showing illustrations of various creatures, some recognizable, others fantastic, connected to human figures by threads of energy. Merlin himself had several familiars throughout his long life, Artemis continued. The most famous was a great owl named Archimedes, but there were others, a white stag, a pine marten, and most powerfully, a young dragon he rescued as a hatchling. Harry studied the illustrations with interest. How do you find a familiar? Can you just choose any animal? Artemis chuckled. If only it were so simple. The familiar bond requires compatibility, a resonance between your magic and the creature's inherent nature. Some wizards spend their entire lives searching for the perfect familiar. He closed the book. However, in your case, we have an advantage. Somewhere in the world, Merlin's original familiars, or their descendants, may still exist, drawn to your reawakening energy. How would we find them? Harry asked, excitement building. There are rituals designed for precisely this purpose. Artemis returned the book to its shelf. And as it happens, the approaching new moon would be an ideal time for such working. Shall we prepare? The ritual required 3 days of preparation. First, Harry gathered materials, silver dust, moonstone shavings, essence of nightshade, and 7 perfect feathers from 7 different birds. Next came the creation of the summoning circle, a complex pattern of interlocking symbols drawn in silver paste on the atrium floor, each line and curve representing an aspect of magical connection. Finally, on the night of the new moon, Harry stood at the circle's center, barefoot and dressed in simple robes of undyed cotton. In his right hand, he held Merlin's wand, in his left, a crystal bowl containing water collected from 7 different sources, river, rain, sea, spring, well, morning dew, and wizard's tears, provided, somewhat embarrassingly, by Artemis after Harry recounted a particularly funny anecdote from his previous existence. Remember, Artemis instructed from beyond the circle's edge, the ritual opens a pathway. What travels that path is determined by the resonance between your magic and the creatures that might serve as your familiar. Focus on the qualities you seek, loyalty, wisdom, strength, rather than a specific form. Harry nodded, then closed his eyes and raised the wand. The incantation was lengthy and complex, alternating between Latin, Celtic, and a third language Harry recognized from Merlin's memories as the ancient tongue of dragons. As he spoke the words, the silver lines of the summoning circle began to glow with soft blue light. The bowl of 7-fold water in his left hand grew warm, then hot, though it didn't burn his skin. Through closed eyelids, Harry sensed the liquid beginning to glow with the same blue radiance as the circle. Cast the water upward, Artemis instructed softly. Harry did so, flinging the contents of the bowl toward the ceiling. Instead of falling back down, the glowing water hung suspended in the air, forming a shimmering dome over the circle. As Harry continued the incantation, the dome stretched upward, becoming a column of light that passed through the physical ceiling of the atrium and extended, elsewhere. In his mind's eye, Harry saw the column reaching across vast distances, over forests and mountains, seas and deserts. The magical beacon called out, seeking resonance, inviting response. For what seemed like hours but was likely only minutes, Harry maintained the connection, pouring his intent into the summoning. Just as his strength began to falter, he felt something, an answering pulse of energy, distant but approaching rapidly. The column of light flickered, then stabilized as whatever had responded drew nearer. Something comes, Artemis murmured, tension evident in his voice. Be ready, Harry. The column contracted suddenly, pulling inward like water down a drain. A rush of wind filled the atrium, extinguishing candles and sending papers flying. The silver lines of the summoning circle flared brilliantly, then faded to dull gray. In the circle's center, where nothing had been a moment before, stood a bird. Not just any bird, Harry realized as he lowered his wand. An owl, but unlike any he had seen in Diagon Alley or in Muggle picture books. Larger than a typical owl, with feathers that shimmered with an iridescent quality that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue depending on how the light struck them. Its eyes were amber, intelligent and watchful, fixed unblinkingly on Harry's face. Magnificent, Artemis breathed. A night-wing owl. I haven't seen one in at least 2 centuries. The owl tilted its head, regarding Harry with what seemed like consideration. Then, deliberately, it spread its impressive wings, at least a 4-foot span, and bowed. Without thinking, Harry bowed in return. "Thank you for answering my call," he said, the formal words coming from somewhere in Merlin's memories. The owl made a soft trilling sound, then launched itself from the floor, flying a circuit around Harry's head before landing lightly on his shoulder. Its weight was substantial but not uncomfortable. Up close, Harry could see intricate patterns in its feathers, whorls and lines that resembled star charts. Is this Archimedes?" Harry asked, hardly daring to hope. Artemis shook his head. "No, though perhaps a descendant. Night-wing owls are exceptionally long-lived for birds, up to 100 years, but even they aren't immortal." He approached cautiously, studying the owl with evident fascination. "This is quite remarkable, Harry. Night-wing owls are exceedingly rare. Most wizards go their entire lives without seeing one, let alone bonding with one." The owl nuzzled against Harry's ear, its feathers impossibly soft. He felt a curious sensation, a gentle pressure at the edges of his mind, like someone knocking politely at a door. "It's trying to establish the familiar bond," Artemis explained, seeing Harry's startled expression. "Lower your occlumency shields, just a little, and welcome it in." Harry hesitated only briefly before doing as instructed. The moment he eased his mental defenses, he felt the owl's consciousness touch his own, not invasive but complementary, like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. Images flowed between them, great forests seen from above, midnight hunts through star-filled skies, a nest high in an ancient oak, and beneath it all, a sense of waiting, of purpose unfulfilled until now. "Hello," Harry whispered, both aloud and through the newly formed mental connection. "Do you have a name?" The owl's response came not in words but in sensations: moonlight on still water, the rustle of wings through darkness, silent flight above sleeping earth. "Night Shadow," Harry translated, the name feeling right. "May I call you Shadow?" The owl, Shadow, trilled its approval, talons tightening slightly on Harry's shoulder in what felt like affection. "The bond is established," Artemis confirmed, smiling broadly. "Congratulations, Harry. A familiar of such power and rarity. Well, it bodes extremely well for your development." Harry stroked Shadow's chest feathers gently, marveling at the connection he could feel developing between them, a bridge of shared energy and purpose. "What exactly will Shadow do for me?" he asked. "How does the familiar bond work?" "Many ways," Artemis replied, summoning chairs for them both with a casual wave. The ritual had clearly drained Harry more than he'd realized, his legs trembled with fatigue as he gratefully sank into the offered seat. Shadow adjusted smoothly, maintaining its perch on his shoulder. "Primarily, your familiar will act as a magical reservoir and conduit," Artemis explained. "Shadow can absorb excess energy when your spellcasting threatens to overwhelm your physical form, and provide additional power when needed. The bond also enhances your natural abilities, your senses, particularly night vision, will improve. Night-wing owls are renowned for their silent flight and ability to navigate magical concealment, so Shadow may help you detect hidden things." Harry nodded, already feeling subtle changes. His fatigue seemed less crushing with the owl's steady presence, and the room appeared slightly sharper, colors more vivid. "Shadow will also serve as messenger and scout," Artemis continued. "Far more reliable and discreet than standard post owls. The mental connection allows communication at distances that would challenge even the most powerful sending spells." "Can all wizards form familiar bonds like this?" Harry asked. "Technically, yes, though modern wizarding education barely acknowledges the practice." Artemis sighed. "Another example of old knowledge falling away in favor of standardized, controllable magic. The Ministry prefers wand-based spells that can be monitored and regulated. Familiar bonds are too personal, too variable for their liking. Shadow made a soft hooting sound that somehow conveyed disdain for Ministry regulations. Harry laughed, feeling the owl's amusement through their connection. "I think we're going to be great friends," he told his new familiar, who responded with a gentle headbutt against his cheek. "You should rest now," Artemis advised. "The summoning ritual is magically demanding, and establishing the familiar bond requires energy as well. Tomorrow, we'll begin working with Shadow to strengthen your connection and explore its capabilities." Harry nodded, suddenly aware of bone-deep weariness. He stood carefully, mindful of the owl still perched on his shoulder. "Will Shadow need somewhere to sleep? Food?" "Nightwing owls are largely self-sufficient," Artemis assured him. "Shadow will hunt at night and return to you. As for sleeping arrangements, I suspect your familiar will make its preferences known." Sure enough, when Harry reached his bedroom, Shadow flew from his shoulder to the top of a tall bookcase near the window, settling into a dignified roosting position. "Good night, Shadow," Harry said aloud, though he could have communicated through their mental link. The owl blinked its amber eyes once in acknowledgement before tucking its head beneath one wing. Harry changed into nightclothes and climbed into bed, his mind buzzing despite his exhaustion. A magical familiar, his own Nightwing owl. It was like something from one of the fantastic stories he'd glimpsed Dudley reading but had never been allowed to touch himself. As he drifted towards sleep, Harry felt Shadow's consciousness brushing lightly against his own, a comforting presence that seemed to promise that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would not face them alone. The familiar bond proved its value almost immediately. With Shadow's help, Harry's magical endurance increased dramatically. Spells that had previously left him drained now came more easily, and his ability to maintain focus during meditation sessions doubled, then tripled. "The owl stabilizes your energy flow," Artemis observed during a particularly intense practice session in early September. "See how the magic cycles between you rather than simply draining from you." Harry nodded, feeling the difference. When he channeled power through Merlin's wand, Shadow absorbed any excess, prevented wasteful discharge, and returned the energy to him in a purified state. The result was greater efficiency and far less strain on his young body. Beyond the magical benefits, Harry discovered the simple joy of having a companion who understood him completely. Through their mental link, Shadow shared glimpses of night flights over London, hunting expeditions in distant forests, and observations of both magical and Muggle worlds from a unique aerial perspective. In return, Harry shared his growing collection of memories, both his own limited experiences and the increasingly accessible recollections of Merlin's long life. Shadow seemed particularly interested in the ancient wizard's encounters with dragons, sending curious impressions that Harry interpreted as questions. "Yes, he raised a white dragon from an egg," Harry explained one evening as they sat before the fire in his quarters. "Her name was Aithusa. She gave a heartstring willingly for the creation of the wand." Shadow's mental response conveyed understanding and reverence. Dragons were rare even in the wizarding world now, the owl indicated, showing Harry images of distant, inaccessible mountains where a few still nested, far from human interference. "Perhaps we'll see one someday," Harry mused, stroking Shadow's feathers. "When I'm older and ready to seek the 4 treasures." The mention of the treasures sent a ripple of excitement through their bond. Shadow clearly recognized their significance, though the owl's knowledge seemed limited to impressions rather than specific locations. "You'll help me find them when the time comes?" Harry asked. Shadow trilled affirmatively, puffing out its chest in what Harry had come to recognize as a gesture of pride and determination. Their peaceful evening was interrupted by a gentle chime, the signal that Artemis required Harry's presence in the atrium. Shadow launched from his perch on the back of Harry's chair, gliding silently ahead as Harry made his way through the connecting doorway. He found Artemis standing before a large mirror that hadn't been there earlier in the day. Unlike ordinary mirrors, this one showed not reflections but a swirling silver mist that occasionally parted to reveal glimpses of distant places. "Ah, Harry, good timing," Artemis said, turning from the mirror. "I've received some rather interesting news that I believe requires your attention." "What kind of news?" Harry asked, watching Shadow circle once before landing on a perch near the oak table. "It seems that Nicholas Flamel has agreed to move the Philosopher's Stone to Hogwarts for safekeeping." Artemis gestured to the mirror, which cleared to show an image of a severe-looking castle perched atop a cliff beside a vast lake. Dumbledore convinced him that recent activities suggest someone may be attempting to steal it. Harry frowned. "The Philosopher's Stone. I know that name." He closed his eyes, searching through the still fragmented memories of his previous life. "I, Merlin, helped Nicholas create it. Not intentionally. I was researching longevity elixirs and shared some findings with him. He took the work much further than I'd anticipated." "Precisely," Artemis confirmed. "The stone is a remarkable achievement, capable of producing the elixir of life and transforming base metals into gold. Flamel has used it to extend his and his wife Perenelle's lives for over 6 centuries. But why move it to Hogwarts?" Harry asked. "And why now?" Artemis's expression grew somber. "My sources suggest increased activity among certain dark wizards, those who remained loyal to Voldemort even after his disappearance. There are rumors of his possible return, and the elixir of life would provide a means for him to regain physical form without relying on more esoteric methods." A chill ran down Harry's spine as he recalled his dream of the cold voice and the great serpent. "He's looking for ways to come back." "So it would seem." Artemis waved a hand, and the mirror's view shifted to show a small, red crystal emanating gentle golden light. "The stone itself is a powerful magical artifact, but not inherently dangerous. In the wrong hands, however. It could help resurrect Voldemort," Harry finished grimly. "Which brings me to why I've called you here." Artemis dismissed the mirror with another gesture. "Nicholas Flamel will be visiting London next week to finalize arrangements with Dumbledore regarding the stone's protection. This presents a rare opportunity for you to meet him, discreetly, of course." Harry's eyes widened. "Meet Nicholas Flamel? But won't he tell Dumbledore about me?" "Not if we approach the situation correctly." Artemis smiled enigmatically. "Flamel owes much to Merlin's knowledge, which he has never publicly acknowledged. Moreover, he and Dumbledore, while colleagues, do not always see eye to eye on magical philosophy. I believe he can be trusted with the truth of your dual nature, and his insights could prove invaluable to your development." Shadow sent a pulse of cautious approval through their bond. The owl sensed no deception in Artemis's proposal, though its feelings about meeting the ancient alchemist were mixed. "How would we arrange this meeting?" Harry asked. "Leave that to me," Artemis replied. "What's important is preparing you. Flamel is brilliant but cautious. He'll require proof of your identity beyond mere claims or demonstrations of magical ability." "The memory stone," Harry suggested. "If he helped create the Philosopher's Stone using Merlin's knowledge, he might recognize it." "An excellent starting point," Artemis agreed. "We should also prepare you to discuss alchemical principles that only Merlin would know, specifically, the theoretical basis for the stone's transformative properties that you shared with Flamel centuries ago." The next several days were devoted to intensive study of alchemy, both theoretical foundations and practical applications. Harry spent hours with the memory stone, retrieving specific details of Merlin's interactions with a much younger Nicholas Flamel in the 14th century. Though these memories were among the most challenging to access, requiring deeper communion than Harry had previously attempted, they gradually surfaced with sufficient clarity for him to discuss them coherently. The key insight wasn't transmutation itself, Harry explained to Artemis during one review session, but the understanding that all matter contains latent magical energy that can be realigned through proper catalysts. Gold isn't created from lead, rather, lead's inherent structure is shifted to match gold's magical resonance. Artemis nodded approvingly. "Excellent. That particular theory wasn't published in any of Flamel's writings, he kept it private to prevent misuse. If you can articulate it to him, along with the specific experimental methods you suggested for stabilizing the process, he'll have little choice but to accept your identity. On the appointed day, Harry prepared himself carefully. He dressed in new robes of deep blue trimmed with silver, formal enough to show respect without appearing ostentatious. The glamour charm hung around his neck, altering his appearance from the distinctive Harry Potter to the more anonymous brown-haired, hazel-eyed boy who occasionally visited Uncle Artemis at his bookshop. Shadow would remain at the sanctuary, their mental link sufficient to maintain communication if needed. Remember, Artemis instructed as they prepared to leave, Flamel is over 600 years old. He has seen civilizations rise and fall, magical traditions evolve and fade. He may appear as a man in his 60s, the age at which he began using the elixir, but his perspective is vastly different from most wizards you'll encounter. Harry nodded, slipping the memory stone into a special pocket sewn into his robes. I'm ready. They used the port key to travel to the bookshop, which was closed for the day with a sign indicating private consultation. Artemis led Harry through the maze of books to a section he hadn't explored before, where a narrow spiral staircase descended to a lower level. My private consultation room, Artemis explained as they descended. Warded against all forms of magical surveillance and interference. Even the Ministry's most advanced detection spells cannot penetrate these walls. The room at the base of the stairs was circular, lined with shelves of ancient-looking tomes and illuminated by softly glowing orbs that floated near the ceiling. A round table of dark wood dominated the center, surrounded by 3 chairs carved with various magical symbols. Flamel will arrive precisely at noon, Artemis said, checking his peculiar watch. We have approximately 10 minutes to prepare. Harry took a seat at the table, running through mental exercises to calm his nerves. Meeting someone who had known Merlin, his previous self, directly would be a new experience. Would Flamel recognize something of the ancient wizard in him, even through the glamour charm? How much could he trust the alchemist with the truth of his situation? At exactly noon, a soft chime sounded. One section of the circular wall shimmered and became transparent, revealing what appeared to be a door where solid stone had been a moment before. Right on time, Artemis murmured. Punctuality is a virtue Nicholas has cultivated over centuries. The door opened, and a man stepped through. Of medium height and slender build, Nicholas Flamel appeared to be in his mid-60s, with silver-streaked dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, however, were what caught Harry's attention, deep gray with flecks of gold. They held a depth of knowledge and experience that belied the alchemist's relatively youthful appearance. Artemis, Flamel greeted, his voice carrying a faint accent Harry couldn't quite place. It has been, 70 years? You look exactly the same, old friend. His gaze shifted to Harry. And this must be the young man you mentioned in your message. A magical prodigy with questions about advanced alchemy, was it? Of a sort, Artemis replied enigmatically, gesturing for Flamel to take a seat. Though I may have undersold the situation somewhat. This is not merely a talented young wizard, Nicholas. Flamel raised an eyebrow as he settled into the offered chair. Oh. Have you finally taken an apprentice after all these centuries? I admit, I'd given up hope of seeing that day. Not an apprentice. Artemis glanced at Harry, who nodded slightly. A returned master. Flamel's expression remained politely interested, though his eyes sharpened. Speak plainly, Artemis. You know how I detest riddles. Very well. Artemis turned to Harry. Perhaps you should explain yourself. Harry straightened in his chair, meeting Flamel's penetrating gaze directly. Sir, what I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I ask that you withhold judgment until I've provided evidence. He took a deep breath. My current name, is Harry Potter. If Flamel was surprised by this revelation, he showed no sign. The boy who lived. Interesting. You appear different than the descriptions I've heard, though glamour charms would explain that easily enough. Yes, sir. The disguise is necessary for now. Harry continued, but my identity as Harry Potter is only half the truth. 2 months ago, I underwent a goblin heritage ritual at Gringotts that revealed I am also the reincarnation of Merlin Ambrosius. Now Flamel reacted, his eyes widening marginally before his composure reasserted itself. A significant claim, he said carefully. One that would require equally significant proof. I understand. Harry withdrew the memory stone from his robes and placed it on the table. Do you recognize this? Flamel leaned forward, studying the color-shifting stone without touching it. A memory stone, he said softly. Extremely rare. I've only seen one other in my lifetime, owned by. He trailed off, his gaze returning to Harry's face with new intensity. By Merlin himself, Harry finished. Who gave it to you temporarily in the summer of 1382 to help with your work on alchemical memory enhancement, a side project while you struggled with stabilizing the transformative matrix of what would eventually become the Philosopher's Stone. Flamel went very still. That information is known to exactly 2 people in the world, myself, and the wizard who assisted me during that critical phase of my research. 3 people, Harry corrected gently. You, the wizard who was Merlin, and myself, who now carries his memories and knowledge alongside my own. The specific theoretical framework you provided, Flamel said, his voice barely above a whisper, for correlating material transformation with the lunar phases, explain it. Harry closed his eyes briefly, accessing the relevant memories. The key was understanding that alchemical transformations follow patterns mirroring celestial cycles. Gold resonates most strongly with solar energy, but needs lunar stabilization to maintain permanent transformation. I suggested a 17-step process synchronized with the waxing and waning moon, using distilled dew collected at specific lunar phases as a binding agent for the catalytic matrix. When he opened his eyes, Flamel was staring at him with unconcealed astonishment. Impossible, the alchemist murmured. That process was never documented. I committed it to memory only, fearing the consequences should such knowledge become widespread. Yet here I am, Harry said simply. With memories that could only come from the source of that knowledge. Flamel rose abruptly and paced the circumference of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. Reincarnation is theoretically possible, of course, but extraordinarily rare. And for Merlin to return now, in the body of Harry Potter of all people. He stopped and turned back to the table. The implications are staggering. Which is why we sought your counsel, Artemis interjected. You knew Merlin in his previous incarnation, however briefly, and you understand the intersection of ancient and modern magical traditions better than anyone alive. Flamel returned to his seat, his keen eyes studying Harry with new awareness. How complete are the memories? How integrated is your consciousness? The memories return gradually, Harry explained. At first they were fragmented, confusing. The memory stone helps organize and access them. I'm becoming more integrated each day, less Harry and Merlin, more a single person with 2 lifetimes of experiences. And your magic? Developing faster than expected for my physical age. My familiar helps manage the energy flow until my body matures enough to channel it directly. A familiar? Flamel looked intrigued. Not merely a magical pet, I presume, but a true bonded companion. A nightwing owl named Shadow, Harry confirmed. Flamel nodded appreciatively. Remarkable creatures. I haven't seen one in at least a century. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. I believe you, Harry Potter, or Merlin Ambrosius, or whatever combination of names best describes you now. The knowledge you possess could not have been acquired through any means save direct memory of events I've shared with no one. Relief washed through Harry. Having Flamel's belief, his confirmation, somehow made his dual nature seem more real, more legitimate. Thank you, sir. Nicholas, please, the alchemist corrected with a small smile. We were colleagues once, after all. His expression grew more serious. Though I must ask, why reveal yourself now? Particularly to me? Artemis answered, we learned of your plans to move the Philosopher's Stone to Hogwarts. Given its connection to Merlin's original research and the possibility that Voldemort seeks it for his resurrection, we felt you deserved to know who watches over its legacy. Ah. Flamel's eyes narrowed. And am I to understand that you disapprove of my arrangement with Albus? Not disapprove, Harry said carefully. But we, are concerned. Hogwarts is filled with children. If Voldemort or his agents attempt to steal the stone, innocent lives could be endangered. A fair point, Flamel conceded. Though Albus has designed protections that should prove adequate. And keeping the stone at Hogwarts, under his direct supervision, offers advantages over other locations. He studied Harry thoughtfully. Unless you're suggesting an alternative? Harry exchanged glances with Artemis before responding. Not at this time. But I would like to know more about the protections planned for the stone. If trouble comes, I may be able to help, discreetly. Flamel considered this, clearly weighing risks and benefits. I see no harm in sharing the general framework of the protective measures, he said finally. Albus has recruited several Hogwarts professors to create a series of challenges guarding the stone's chamber. Each challenge reflects the creator's specialty, herbology, charms, transfiguration, and so forth. The idea is that no single wizard, however talented, could easily overcome such diverse obstacles. A reasonable approach, Artemis commented, though not infallible. No security is truly infallible, Flamel acknowledged with a shrug. One can only create sufficient deterrence to discourage all but the most determined. He turned back to Harry. What of you, young Merlin? What are your plans as your powers and memories continue to develop? Harry had given this considerable thought over the past weeks. For now, I'll continue my education with Artemis while maintaining the appearance of an ordinary boy living with his Muggle relatives. When I turn 11, I'll attend Hogwarts as expected, as Harry Potter. And after that? Flamel pressed. I have a warning from my previous self about threats beyond Voldemort, Harry said. Ancient powers stirring, magical balance disrupted. I need to reclaim certain artifacts, the 4 treasures, that Merlin hid for safekeeping. He met the alchemist's gaze directly. And I suspect I'll need allies who understand the old ways, the deeper magic that modern wizardry has forgotten. Allies such as myself and Perenelle, Flamel concluded with a knowing smile. Clever boy. Though I wonder if you realize just how radical your existence is to the established magical order. A child with the knowledge and potential power of Merlin, operating outside Ministry control and Dumbledore's influence. He shook his head. Many will see you as a threat when the truth emerges, as it eventually must. I know, Harry said quietly. That's why I need to be prepared, magically, politically, and personally. The wizarding world expects Harry Potter to be their savior against Voldemort. They have no concept of the larger battles that may lie ahead. Flamel nodded slowly. Well reasoned. And what would you ask of me in this preparation? Your discretion, for now, Harry replied. Knowledge of alchemical processes that might help strengthen my physical form to better channel Merlin's magic. And perhaps. He hesitated, then continued, perhaps insights into how the Philosopher's Stone might be better protected, should current measures prove insufficient. Bold requests, Flamel remarked, though he didn't seem offended. But reasonable under the circumstances. He extended his hand across the table. You have my discretion, young Merlin, and my cautious support. Perenelle will be fascinated to learn of your return, though I assure you, the information will go no further than the 2 of us. Harry shook the offered hand, feeling the surprising strength in the alchemist's grip. Thank you, Nicholas. Don't thank me yet, Flamel said with a wry smile. Balancing allegiance to an awakening Merlin against centuries of friendship with Albus Dumbledore will require considerable diplomatic skill on my part. He released Harry's hand and turned to Artemis. You've chosen an interesting protégé, old friend. Perhaps the most significant magical development in the past 5 centuries. I didn't choose him, Artemis replied mildly. I merely recognized what the fates had arranged and offered what assistance I could. Always the humble facilitator, Flamel chuckled. Some things never change. He rose from his chair. I must go. Albus expects me at Hogwarts this evening to finalize the stone's placement. But I would like to continue our conversation soon, young Merlin. Perhaps at my home in Devon. Perenelle makes an excellent blackberry tart. I'd like that, Harry said sincerely. After Flamel departed through the same hidden door by which he'd arrived, Harry turned to Artemis. That went better than I expected. Nicholas has always been more pragmatic than ideological, Artemis replied, looking pleased. And he values magical knowledge above political concerns. Having access to Merlin's alchemical insights, directly from the source, as it were, would be irresistible to him. Do you trust him completely? Harry asked, remembering Shadow's cautious approval of the meeting. Artemis considered the question seriously. Trust is a spectrum, not an absolute. I trust Nicholas to act according to his nature, curious, knowledge-seeking, generally benevolent but ultimately self-preserving. He won't betray your secret deliberately, but he might be persuaded to share aspects of it if he believed doing so served a greater purpose. Harry nodded, appreciating his mentor's candor. I'll remember that. They returned to the sanctuary, where Shadow awaited with eager curiosity about the meeting. Through their mental link, Harry shared impressions of Flamel and the conversation, receiving in return the owl's assessment, cautious optimism tinged with wariness. I feel the same, Harry told his familiar as they settled in his quarters. Flamel could be a valuable ally, especially regarding the Philosopher's Stone. But we'll need to be careful how much we reveal to him about our long-term plans. Shadow trilled softly, projecting an image of Harry surrounded by a growing circle of diverse figures, some human, some not, all connected by threads of golden light. Building a network, Harry interpreted. Yes, that's exactly what we need to do. People who know different aspects of the truth, who can help in different ways. He smiled at his familiar. Starting with you, of course. The owl puffed up proudly, then projected another image, a young girl with bushy hair surrounded by books, her face eager and intelligent. Who is that? Harry asked, surprised. Have you seen her during your flights? Shadow's response was puzzling, a sense of not yet, combined with already known. The owl seemed unable to clarify further, as if the knowledge came from somewhere beyond its understanding. One of life's mysteries to solve another day, Artemis commented from the doorway, having overheard Harry's one-sided conversation. Shadow's species is known for occasional prophetic insights, glimpses of potential futures or significant connections. Time will reveal the meaning. Harry nodded, filing away the strange image for future reference. What happens now? After meeting Flamel, I mean. Now we accelerate your training, Artemis replied, his expression growing more serious. Nicholas's involvement with the stone at Hogwarts confirms our timeline, events are moving forward as histories record them. Which means you have approximately 5 years before you must take your place at Hogwarts as Harry Potter, ready to face whatever challenges await. 5 years isn't much time, Harry observed, thinking of all he still needed to learn and master. No, Artemis agreed. It isn't. Which is why I believe it's time to introduce you to more practical applications of your growing abilities. Theory and controlled practice have their place, but some lessons can only be learned through real-world experience. Harry straightened, intrigued. What kind of real-world experience? A field trip, Artemis said with a small smile. To investigate rumors of unusual magical activity at one of Britain's ancient sacred sites, activity that may be connected to the stirring of old powers you witnessed in your dream. Shadow launched from his perch, circling excitedly above their heads. The owl clearly approved of this development. When do we leave? Harry asked, already imagining the possibilities. Tomorrow evening, Artemis replied. Pack lightly but prepare thoroughly. We may encounter more than merely academic interest. As his mentor departed, Harry exchanged a look with Shadow. The owl projected a mixture of excitement and caution, anticipation of adventure balanced with awareness of potential danger. My thoughts exactly, Harry agreed. But it's time to put our training to the test. We can't stay hidden forever, learning in safety while enemies gather strength. He moved to the window, gazing out at the magical panorama Artemis had enchanted it to display, currently a sweeping view of Dartmoor under moonlight. Sooner or later, we'll have to face whatever's coming. Shadow landed on his shoulder, a reassuring weight and presence. Through their bond came a simple but powerful sentiment, together. Harry smiled, reaching up to stroke the owl's midnight blue feathers. Together, he agreed. Always. The field trip Artemis proposed took them to the Avebury Stone Circle in Wiltshire, one of Britain's oldest and most extensive Neolithic monuments. They arrived at dusk via a series of complicated transportation methods designed to avoid magical detection, first by Portkey to a small wizarding village in Hampshire, then via Muggle transportation to a nearby town, and finally on foot along ancient pathways that Artemis claimed were themselves protective against scrying. Avebury has been a center of magical convergence for over 5,000 years, Artemis explained as they approached the massive circular earthwork that enclosed the stone formations. Unlike Stonehenge, which has become too famous and closely monitored, Avebury maintains much of its original magical potency. Harry, disguised by his glamour charm and dressed in practical Muggle clothing, carried a small backpack containing essentials. Shadow had flown ahead and now circled high above, keeping watch and relaying impressions of the landscape through their mental link. What exactly are we looking for? Harry asked, sensing power in the ancient site even from a distance. Reports indicate unusual magical signatures during the new moon, Artemis replied. Locals speak of lights dancing among the stones, and several magical creatures, including a unicorn herd that normally remains deep in the forests, have been sighted near the circle. He glanced at the darkening sky. Tonight isn't a new moon, but the energies should still be detectable to those who know how to sense them. As they entered the outer ring of the massive earthwork, Harry felt a subtle change, like walking through an invisible curtain of static electricity. His magical sensitivity, enhanced by both Merlin's awakening consciousness and Shadow's familiar bond, detected layers of ancient power woven into the very ground beneath their feet. The ley lines are active, he murmured, recognizing the sensation from Merlin's memories. More active than they should be. Artemis nodded grimly. Precisely why we're here. Something, or someone, is stimulating the Earth's natural magical currents. The question is whether it's a natural fluctuation or deliberate manipulation. They moved deeper into the site as true darkness fell. The quarter moon provided minimal illumination, casting long shadows from the massive standing stones that formed the inner circles. Few tourists remained at this hour, though Harry spotted a small group of robed figures near the largest stone, likely modern pagans conducting some ritual, Artemis explained quietly. Muggles who sense echoes of the old magic, he clarified. Harmless enthusiasts, for the most part, though occasionally one with genuine sensitivity might accidentally trigger minor magical effects. Through his connection with Shadow, Harry received a sudden alert, a flare of power on the northern edge of the circle, near a grouping of 3 particularly tall stones. The owl's aerial perspective showed a shimmer of unnatural light emanating from the ground between the megaliths. There, Harry pointed. Shadow sees something. They changed direction, moving cautiously toward the northern stones. As they drew nearer, Harry felt the magical currents intensify, not just the gentle flow of the ley lines now, but a more concentrated power being drawn upward from deep within the earth. Someone's tapping the node, Artemis whispered, his expression concerned. The convergence point of multiple ley lines beneath Avebury. That's extremely advanced magic, and potentially dangerous. They paused behind a smaller standing stone, observing the scene ahead. A robed figure knelt between the 3 tall megaliths, hands pressed flat against the ground. Even from a distance, Harry could see that the earth beneath the figure's palms glowed with a pulsing violet light that spread in intricate patterns like illuminated roots. Is that a ritual? Harry asked softly. Yes, but not one I recognize, Artemis replied, his brow furrowed. The pattern suggests extraction rather than communion, taking from the node rather than working with it. Shadow sent another alert. The owl had detected a second figure concealed in shadows beyond the stones, watching the ritual performer. This observer wore darker robes and remained perfectly still, as if waiting for something. "We're not the only ones interested in this activity," Harry murmured, relaying Shadow's observation. Artemis nodded. "Stay close. We'll circle around for a better view of both figures." They moved silently along the perimeter, using the standing stones for cover. Harry felt increasingly uneasy as they drew closer to the ritual. The magical energy being pulled from the earth felt wrong somehow, discordant, like music played in an unpleasant key. When they reached a position offering clear sightlines to both the ritual performer and the hidden observer, Harry gasped softly. The kneeling figure had thrown back their hood, revealing long, silver-blonde hair that seemed to glow with its own luminescence in the moonlight. From this angle, Harry could see it was a woman, young, perhaps in her 20s, with striking features and an expression of intense concentration. "Artemis," he whispered urgently. "I recognize her, not from my life as Harry, but from before. From Merlin's memories." Artemis looked sharply at him. "Who is she?" "Not her exactly," Harry clarified, searching the fragmented memories. "But her bloodline. The silver hair, the way she channels earth magic, she's descended from Morgana's lineage." "Le Fay?" Artemis breathed, visibly startled. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be with incomplete memories." Harry focused on the woman again. "The magical signature is distinctive, wild, powerful, aligned with earth and water rather than air and fire as most modern magic tends to be." The hidden observer suddenly shifted position, moving with preternatural grace to a closer vantage point. Harry caught a glimpse of a sharp-featured face beneath the dark hood, male, with eyes that reflected the moonlight like a cat's. "And that one?" Artemis murmured. "Another familiar presence?" Harry shook his head. "I don't think so. But he's not fully human. Something else." As if sensing their scrutiny, the dark-robed observer turned his head slightly in their direction. Harry instinctively strengthened his occlumency shields, drawing Shadow's energy to help conceal his magical presence. Too late. The observer's reflective eyes narrowed, and he made a subtle gesture toward the ritual performer. The silver-haired woman's head snapped up, her hands lifting from the ground. The violet light patterns continued spreading momentarily before fading. She turned, scanning the perimeter with eyes that Harry now saw were an unnatural shade of purple, similar to Artemis's but more vivid, almost glowing. "We've been detected," Artemis warned, drawing his wand. "Prepare yourself." The woman rose fluidly to her feet and made a sweeping motion with her arm. The earth before her erupted, sending a wave of soil and grass racing toward their position with unnatural speed. Harry reacted instinctively, drawing Merlin's Rowan wand from his pocket and calling forth a shield. "Protego," he shouted, focusing not just on blocking the earthen wave but on deflecting its energy back into the ground. The collision was jarring but effective. The wave broke against his shield, soil streaming around them like water parting around a rock. When it subsided, they stood exposed, the smaller standing stone that had concealed them partially buried in displaced earth. "Visitors," the silver-haired woman called, her voice musical yet cold. "How discourteous to spy on a lady's private activities." "Forgive the intrusion," Artemis replied smoothly, stepping forward with his wand held non-threateningly at his side. "We noticed unusual magical signatures and grew concerned for the site's integrity. Avebury is, after all, a protected historical monument." The woman laughed, a sound like winter whined through frozen branches. "Historical? This circle was old when your ancestors were painting themselves blue and living in mud huts, wizard." Her purple eyes shifted to Harry, narrowing slightly. "And you bring a child to investigate? How irresponsible." Harry met her gaze steadily, feeling Shadow's reassuring presence through their bond. The owl had descended to a lower altitude, ready to intervene if needed. My apprentice is more capable than his appearance suggests, Artemis said mildly. Though I admit, we didn't expect to encounter one of Morgana's descendants conducting earth magic rituals in the moonlight. The woman went very still, her expression sharpening. You presume much, stranger. Her gaze returned to Harry, more intense now. Few recognize my lineage at a glance. Who exactly are you? Harry felt a subtle pressure against his mental shields, a light probing, testing for weaknesses. With Shadow's help, he maintained his defenses while projecting an impression of ordinary, if precocious, magical ability. Friends of the old ways, he answered carefully. Concerned about unusual power draws from sacred nodes. Concerned? The woman's lips curved in a cold smile. Or jealous of access to such power? The dark-robed observer moved then, stepping out from behind the megaliths to stand beside the woman. Up close, his inhuman nature became more evident, skin too pale, features too sharp, movements too fluid. Sidhe blood, Artemis murmured, almost to himself. Interesting companionship. The part-fey male spoke for the first time, his voice like velvet over steel. Lysandra, we should continue elsewhere. Too many eyes watch now. He glanced meaningfully toward the distant group of Muggle pagans, who had noticed the confrontation and were pointing in their direction. The woman, Lysandra, seemed reluctant to withdraw. Not yet, male. I'm curious about these, concerned citizens. She took a step toward Harry, her head tilted slightly. Especially the boy. There's something familiar about his magic. Harry strengthened his shields further, but he couldn't entirely mask the distinctive resonance of Merlin's power within him, not at such close range to someone specifically attuned to its opposite. Another time, perhaps, Artemis intervened, subtly positioning himself between Harry and the woman. As your companion notes, this venue has become unsuitable for detailed discussions. Lysandra's eyes flashed with annoyance, but she nodded reluctantly. Indeed. Though I suspect our paths will cross again, curious ones. She smiled at Harry, the expression not reaching her eyes. Especially yours, young apprentice. I find myself intrigued by your potential. She turned, drawing her hood back up to conceal her distinctive hair. The fey-blooded male gave them a final, assessing look before following her toward the eastern edge of the stone circle. Should we follow them? Harry asked quietly as the pair disappeared into the darkness. Not tonight, Artemis decided. We've learned what we came to discover, and made ourselves known to potentially significant players. He glanced at Harry with concern. Are you all right? That shield you produced was remarkably powerful. Harry nodded, though he felt the familiar drain of channeling too much magic through his young body. Shadow helped stabilize the energy flow. But who was she? What was she doing to the ley line node? Questions better discussed in safer surroundings, Artemis replied, eyeing the approaching Muggle pagans. Let's make our exit before we have to explain ourselves to Muggle authorities. They retreated along the outer earthwork, eventually finding a secluded spot where Artemis produced a port key, a twisted piece of copper wire that would return them to the sanctuary. As Harry reached for the port key, he felt Shadow's urgent warning through their bond. Looking up, he saw the owl diving toward them, mental images streaming into his consciousness. Lysandra and Mael hadn't left after all, but had circled around and were rapidly approaching their position, the woman's hands already glowing with violet energy. They're coming. Harry warned, grabbing the port key. Now. Artemis activated the transportation magic just as a bolt of purplish lightning struck the ground where they had stood. The last thing Harry saw before the port key whisked them away was Lysandra's face, beautiful, furious, and somehow triumphant despite missing her targets. They landed hard in the atrium of the sanctuary, Harry stumbling as the copper wire port key disintegrated into ash. That was closer than I'd have preferred, Artemis said grimly, steadying Harry with a hand on his shoulder. She tracked us far more easily than should have been possible. Shadow arrived moments later, materializing through the special access point Artemis had created for the owl. The familiar circled once before landing on Harry's outstretched arm, projecting concern and residual alarm. "I'm fine," Harry assured the owl, stroking its feathers. "Thanks to your warning. We all need to be more cautious moving forward," Artemis said, moving to the oak table and summoning a set of maps with a wave of his hand. "Lysandra, if that's her real name, clearly possesses abilities beyond what I anticipated. The Cid-blooded companion is concerning as well. The Fae rarely involve themselves in human magical disputes without significant motivation." Harry joined him at the table, where Artemis had opened a map showing ley line patterns across Britain. Avebury sat at the intersection of several major lines, with smaller tributaries branching outward like a river delta. "What was she doing to the node?" Harry asked again. "Extracting," Artemis replied, tracing one of the ley lines with his finger. "Drawing raw magical energy from the earth itself, energy that normally flows freely but gradually. Her ritual accelerated and concentrated that flow, channeling it for some specific purpose." He looked up at Harry. "Did Merlin's memories give you any insight into what a descendant of Morgana might want with such power?" Harry closed his eyes, searching through the still fragmentary recollections of his previous life. Morgana worked extensively with earth magic, particularly sites where the veil between worlds was thinnest. He frowned as a clearer memory surfaced. She believed that by manipulating the ley lines, she could create permanent portals between realms, particularly to Avalon. "Avalon," Artemis repeated softly. "The legendary island where Arthur was taken to heal from his mortal wounds. Where Morgana herself eventually retreated. And where many of Merlin's most powerful artifacts were hidden for safekeeping," Harry added, opening his eyes. "Including, I think, at least one of the 4 treasures mentioned in his letter to me." Shadow shifted on Harry's arm, projecting an image of a jeweled chalice gleaming with inner light. "Yes," Harry agreed, interpreting the owl's communication. "The cup of life, one of the 4 treasures. Shadow thinks it might be what Lysandra is ultimately seeking." Artemis's expression grew troubled. "If she's attempting to create a portal to Avalon, and if she succeeds, the magical repercussions would be enormous. The barriers between worlds exist for good reason. But how would she even know about Avalon or the treasures?" Harry wondered. Those secrets were closely guarded, even in Merlin's time. "Bloodline memory, perhaps," Artemis suggested. "Some magical families pass knowledge through more than just written records or oral traditions. Certain experiences, certain profound magical insights, can imprint on the very essence passed from parent to child." Harry considered this, remembering how naturally some of Merlin's magical techniques had come to him, even before he'd accessed the specific memories. Like muscle memory, but for magic. "Precisely." Artemis rolled up the map with a thoughtful expression. "Which means we must assume Lysandra possesses at least partial knowledge of what you, as Merlin, did to contain Morgana's more dangerous ambitions. And now she's seen you, sensed something of your magical signature despite your shields. She'll be curious," Harry concluded. "Maybe even suspicious." "More than curious," Artemis corrected grimly. "If she inherits any of Morgana's intuitive abilities, she may already suspect your true nature. The timing is too convenient, her emergence coinciding with the reawakening of Merlin's power in the world." Shadow projected agreement, along with images of the silver-haired woman watching Harry from a distance, studying him like a predator assessing potential prey. Harry shivered slightly. "So I've made my first enemy. Perhaps. Or merely attracted the interest of a powerful player whose goals may occasionally align with our own." Artemis sighed. "The magical world is rarely divided into neat categories of ally and enemy, Harry. Most operate from self-interest tempered by varying degrees of principle." "Like Nicholas Flamel," Harry observed. "Indeed. Though I suspect Lysandra's principles differ significantly from the alchemist's." Artemis checked his peculiar timepiece. "It's late, and you've expended considerable magical energy today. We should both rest and process what we've learned. Harry nodded, though his mind was racing with implications and possibilities. Tomorrow, can we focus on earth magic and ley lines? I want to understand exactly what Lysandra was doing, and how to counter it if necessary. A prudent focus, Artemis agreed. I'll also make discreet inquiries about recent sightings of a silver-haired witch and her fey-blooded companion. If they're conducting similar rituals at other sacred sites, we may be able to discern a pattern. As Harry prepared for bed, Shadow maintaining a protective perch nearby, he reflected on how quickly his world had expanded. 2 months ago, he'd been an unwanted child in a cupboard, unaware of magic or his own extraordinary heritage. Now he was training with Merlin's wand, communing with ancient memories, bonded to a magical familiar, and apparently attracting the attention of a descendant of Morgana Le Fay. Life certainly isn't boring anymore, he murmured to Shadow, who responded with the equivalent of an owl's chuckle, a mental impression of amused agreement. As Harry drifted toward sleep, he found himself not frightened by the evening's confrontation, but strangely energized. For the first time, he'd faced potential danger and responded effectively, not just with Merlin's knowledge, but with his own instincts and abilities. Perhaps, he thought as consciousness faded, this was what it meant to truly integrate his dual nature, not Merlin's power inhabiting Harry Potter's form, but a new entity altogether, drawing strength from both aspects of his being. His dreams that night were filled with stone circles and flowing ley lines, and a sense of purpose more clear than any he'd felt since his awakening at Gringotts. Whatever Lysandra sought, whatever threats gathered on the horizon, he would meet them not as a passive recipient of destiny, but as an active shaper of his own fate. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.